Folks, we're going to try and get started. If everyone could take their seats, please. There's more seating up front if folks want to come to the front. Exactly. I'm going to go ahead and call this January 21st, 2020 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming this evening to participate in your government. I do call him Mr. President, but I will refer to him as Lynn Akey, and please ask him to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Thanks very much, Lynn. We will move on to communications from the public. We do have 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening, so if you're here to speak on one of those items, please wait until I call those individual hearings. But if there's anything you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity, and just name and address for the record, please, when you approach the podium. Any public comment tonight? Any public comment? Not seeing, I'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? How about the council? Not seeing any. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Any changes or additions to the January 6th meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval? Rebecca.
Except it would be on, I think it's the second page, but it's not loading quite quickly enough, but Michelle knows about it. It's riparian versus repairing under Richard Hildner's comments.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Yep. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as noted for amendment.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously, Michelle. Which brings us quickly on to our 3 public hearings, which is probably why you're all here. It was for item 6A, which is consideration of a request from Central Avenue Whitefish for a conditional use permit located at 1013 East 7th Street and 1022 East 8th Street to develop 2 18-unit apartment buildings. The property is zoned WR4, which is our high-density multifamily residential district, and this is WCUP 19-24. Before I turn it over to Wendy, I did want to remind everyone that the public hearing is open from the January 6th meeting. I'm not going to request that staff go back through the full staff report. We covered that in depth at the January 6th meeting, and I know many of you were here. What I would like to ask staff and both the applicant is if there's any new information to present to the council and to the public, now would be your opportunity. Information that we were not privy to at the January 6th meeting. We will then move on to public comment after the council has an opportunity to ask both the applicant and staff questions. And again, your comments that were read into the record on January 6th are part of our packet. They're part of the public record, and they've been memorialized in the meeting minutes that are included in the council's packet and the public's packet this evening. So again, if you have any new information to share when we go to the public hearing, that would be your opportunity to share your comments. And if you don't mind, we have probably quite a few folks that would like to provide comment tonight. In the spirit of trying to give everyone an opportunity to participate, if you could hold your comments to 3 minutes and any new information, I would certainly appreciate it. With that said, Wendy.
Okay, so again, you folks held a public hearing at the last meeting and postponed action until this meeting and left the public hearing open. A number of folks spoke at the public hearing, and you of course have reviewed all those staff minutes. So in response, the applicant did submit an updated revised site plan, which is on the screen and also was part of your packet starting on page 39. And then the applicant is going to address the different changes, so I'm not going to go into details, but staff did review the site plan and it does meet all of our city standards. When we got, because we got the packet pretty late, we were still visiting about access onto East 7th and East 8th Street, and so we're prepared to talk about some ideas with that, and Craig's going to do that for us.
Great, thanks, Wendy.
So the figure that Wendy has up is a proposed updated site plan for the development that does push the development slightly further to the west. And one of the things that we heard pretty loud and clear from previous comments that were made at public hearings is that turning that alley into a one-way northbound is not preferred by any stretch of the imagination. And so this was a concept that we were talking with the developer about that would essentially combine the alley and the ingress egress of the parking lot for the proposed development so that there isn't that minimum distance between the alley intersection and the entrance to the facility, or the ingress and egress to the facility. So what it essentially does is it still separates the alley from the proposed drive lane and parking, but it would combine those into one intersection at 7th and 8th. Again, this was just something that we were coming up with to try and maintain two-way traffic in the alley and minimize conflicts on East 7th and East 8th Street from this proposed development. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is the city currently does not have sufficient right-of-way on East 8th Street to widen the road adjacent to this development. At some point in the city's past, there was half of the East 8th Street, the north half of East 8th Street was vacated. And so as part of this proposed development, that northern half will be rededicated to the city, which does allow us to expand 8th Street into a two-way road with a sidewalk along the south side of this development. There's also an approved conditional use permit that the Whitefish Christian Academy has that requires them to improve the eastern portion of East 8th Street. So with this project, we will have an improved two-way street on East 8th Street all the way between Park and Asher, which I think is really important when we look at this grid system. We're all aware that there's significant traffic congestion during morning drop-off and afternoon pickup in the area with all of the schools, and I think creating this grid with two-way traffic on 8th Street will really help to improve that situation. So just a couple things that we did come up with, and then we chatted with the developer on, and I think they can talk about that more during their presentation.
Thanks, Craig.
So just a couple of things. If you wanted to do what Craig is suggesting, we'd need to amend condition 7D, which identifies that we'd have the alley go one-way northbound, and replace that with a condition directing the applicant to work with the Public Works Department on a joint access to East 7th and East 8th Street. And then the applicant is here
Which
to,
condition was that again, Wendy?
again, it was 7D.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Steve, certainly.
Craig, what happens if Whitefish Christian Academy doesn't enact its CUP and widen its part of the road? Does the city have access? Does the city have right-of-way down there?
Yeah, the city does have sufficient right-of-way adjacent to the Christian Academy to make those improvements. It's my understanding that they're under a temporary use permit for those structures, and so they need to do something before the 2020-2021 school year. So if they don't move forward with the approved CUP, they'll likely have to come back for another conditional use permit. And if it doesn't involve the same type of design and structural improvements, then that condition may disappear. But yeah, there is currently sufficient right-of-way to improve that roadway.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Wendy or Craig? Rebecca?
So Craig, you're recommending a sidewalk on the south side of 8th, but then the Christian school parking lot backs right up into that road. So where would the sidewalk stop then?
Yeah, so the sidewalk would go along the north side of
On the
East 8th
north.
Street, and as part of the Christian Academy's new site plan, that parking on the north side of their building goes away. So they'd
Oh,
no
it goes-
longer be,
oh.
Yeah.
they'd no longer be parking right there on the north side of their building.
Okay, so they would not be backing up into a sidewalk.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions for staff? I would like to give the applicant an opportunity. Aaron, if you have anything to add to Wendy's staff report, now would be the opportunity. Just name and address for the record, please. And then we'll go to public comment.
Hi, Aaron Wallace, 265 Hawks Lake Lane, Whitefish. One of the architects and owners of Montana Creative. Thank you guys again for having us back. After our last meeting, we certainly wanted to go back and hear, make some changes based on the comments we've heard to try to help improve and address some of the concerns that the neighbors had had. I'll list those real quickly. One of the first things we did was remove the clubhouse and the hot tub from the project. That was a large concern. We adjusted the layout of the parking area so that all the parking spots are internally towards the building versus in the previous layout before we had some parking and facing towards the west. That allowed us to shift the drive aisle a little bit more towards the left. It also allowed us to put all the lighting. That was a large concern, is bollard style lighting between the sidewalks and the building, so there is no site lighting on the west side of the property. We also adjusted the trash enclosure is basically straight west of that kind of inlet to the internal parking. We put a roof over that up at about 10 feet. So again, hopefully try to block some of the lighting that would be coming down that drive aisle facing towards the west. Another item that we did is we adjusted the roof layouts and roof dimensions and sizing of it to drop it down to a maximum height of 31 foot 4 inches, which is underneath the 35-foot height standard, of course. We also adjusted the internal layout so that on that west side, there's only one bedroom on the second floor that faces that direction window. It's a secondary bedroom. I will note that the floor heights of this project is a 9-foot ceiling, and so it would be a typical second-story window height of a normal residence, to single-family home residence. We've also sat there and went back to the landscaping between the alleyway and our drive aisle. We've increased it to have a berm in the middle of a couple feet and increased the fence height to 6 feet, so you should have kind of an 8-foot barrier there. And I sent in my memo and their spell check caught it wrong, but we will increase the conifers and the Doug firs along that edge to try to block again any sort of visual connection and lighting between the parking and the area. We met with the city today on that advised site plan for conjoining the 2 drive lanes in there. We certainly would support that, don't have any issue with that at all. I know that concern of people, as the neighbors have outlined, traffic flying up and down the current alleyway right now. Well, this would certainly, with that curvature in that lane, slow down that traffic, much less in ours also. But we'd still keep speed bumps in ours to, again, try to help slow things down. So a couple other items. So those are really kind of the physical items we did to really hope to improve and address the project. We've also included a few images in this in our packet to help everybody better understand the overall size and scale of this project related to the neighborhood. I think you can kind of see the overall roof plane massing is very similar to some of the adjacent buildings in the W4R district. So I don't think that the overall size and scale. We've also put the new elementary school and its location and the proposed parking lot in there, just to give a better reference of what actually is going on in this area. We've also, kind of just an update, found out last week that the vacant lot just to the north of our site is going to be also developed into high density residential project. So that will be coming along also. So one of the few things we wanted to kind of point out as part of this is that if we didn't get this project approved, really what would kind of occur here, we haven't designed anything or else like that, but what I'd anticipate seeing, oh, there's my volume, actually better. Sorry about that, look like I can still talk tall or loud. So what we'd be looking at is probably a building of similar or even larger size, probably a 3rd story in it. to get kind of the square footages we'd be looking at there. So the overall massing of the buildings would be very, very similar, if not larger. They would also have each of them two-car garages that would most likely access off the alleyway, like the rest of the residential. And another thing that kind of just to point out too is that since we own, and again, this isn't threats or anything else, this is just kind of the way it would work, is that we do own the right-of-way south of our property for half of that 8th Street. And you couldn't condition anything at that point to make that a two-way street. That'd be more the prerogative of the developer at that point. So we'd only need to provide the access again off the alleyway. So we support this project. We want to do this project. We think it's a great project, but that's just kind of what it would be forced to go into if we had to. A few other things to kind of, as I pointed out in our note, you know, there's been a lot of interest in this project. It's truthfully been pretty remarkable. And you put some thought into it, and I think that, you know, everybody in this community has affiliation to this neighborhood. Look, my wife works at the school. She worked at the Montessori and did the after-school program for years. I've had 3 kids go through this program and spent thousands of hours and time dropping off kids and picking up kids between the high school and the elementary school here. So I have an affiliate. I think I know and my kids know these sidewalks almost better than our own neighborhood out in the woods. So I think that isn't a unique story. I think a lot of people in this area have that common affiliation and use of this neighborhood, and the neighbors have done a great job of sharing it for us and the community overall. But this is a neighborhood that's going to change. You know, whether this project is 36 units or 14 units or something else, this site's going to be changed from a single-family home, which is operated for the last 50, 60 years, to a multifamily development. That same development is going to occur right across the street. And as you can see, where a big field was, where people would be out hanging out, right at kitty corner from this is now a largest elementary school in the state, and also their parking lot, a bunch of their parking. So change is going to occur. It's really kind of a question of where and what the direction is of the change you want to have. Traffic concerns, absolutely. There's no question we're going to increase traffic from a single-family home. Any project would do that. So, you know, it's a question of whether in this that we don't have any data or any information supporting that some threshold is crossed here. So that safety, it isn't a safe environment to be in. We aren't introducing anything new with these curb cuts. We aren't introducing anything new with the multifamily. People already cross streets there and access points. They're used to that type of environment. And I think an important number is a realistic number of what the traffic flow actually is in there. And I think the traffic study outlined that as 1 car for every 5 minutes. So basically the time I've been talking, there's only been 1 car that would have accessed this point. So, you know, the streets by the professionals that can support this stuff. Traffic is a concern, absolutely, during those, you know, there's a lot of traffic during those 20 minutes, but a threshold isn't crossed. You can look at this, and I think that you sit there and say, when we think about this, if we would have proposed 14 units and only 7 would have been allowed by right, would 14 have been too much? There isn't some magic number with 36. There is no rule or regulation saying, in fact, much more can be proposed. But there isn't anything saying that 36 is too much. There isn't anything saying that the traffic that 36 has is too much. What we're talking about is perception here. Perception about what the people have lived in this area, and everything else. And other people have used it. So I just want to be realistic. I want to focus, you know, as a professional, we focus on the numbers. We focus on what we're required to do. This project really meets all the regulations and requirements that you guys have set up. It's a great project. It's a project that the community should support. It provides 36 workforce or affordable type units, 7 of which are deed restricted at 70%. You know, I really hope you guys take a look at that, and we hope you approve our project. Any questions I can answer?
Thanks, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron? Rebecca?
Oops. Thank you for trying to integrate so much of the community concerns. Really appreciate it when people do that. And And also, did you bring up the one that's north for any reason? Do you guys own that too or something?
Nope, not at all,
Okay.
not affiliated at all, just what I heard last week, that, again, that's getting developed and also, so change is gonna happen. No, but I have no affiliation, nothing whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one question for Craig.
Frank, do you have something first for Aaron?
Aaron, I know that these changes were only available to the public, or the proposed changes were only available to the public
Since
effectively
Friday.
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday, yep.
And when the public, and to the extent anybody's seen it, it might be helpful for the community here to at least see some of the elevation changes. I know you had those in our packet. I don't know if you have an ability to do that, or Wendy can. It
Well,
might be
I
helpful
don't wanna touch
for,
that
again,
button.
for the group to see that.
Sure, you
part of
bet.
this process.
And that was submitted on the 13th, so there was
Right.
about, yeah, so it wasn't just last Thursday, just wanted to
No,
clarify
no,
that.
it's in terms of how mu, when the public might have access to
Yep.
it. which
So as you guys can kind of see, if I can do a quick description of this as we kind of scroll through, there was a small section through the landscape buffer, what we're doing. There's the new proposed elevation. It's very, very similar to what we have. The widest width that we have for the gables is about 30 feet. So it's a typical, if you had a single family home 30 feet wide with a 712 roof, that's the height you get out of it. The ceilings are 9 foot high. The maximum height at the peak there is 31'6", I believe. So, and then as you can kind of see, the bottom elevation on the left is the one that would be facing the neighborhoods. There's a series of smaller windows that are up at 6 foot height to allow some light into a stairway corridor, and then you have 2 secondary bedroom windows at that point. So I know that facade was a big concern. You know, we're doing a kind of a building that has a series of character of porches and decks off of there. They're not large, so it's not going to be huge gathering spaces. That's kind of a proposal. You know, the overall styling and look would be something we've been seeing a lot lately with this kind of board and batten white look. And these are conceptual in nature, but I think they'd be fairly close to what we'd be proposing. So that was that elevation there that'd be facing towards the west. So you have a stairway corridor on the right and then a unit towards the left. And those are on both buildings, that would be that.
Further questions for Aaron?
I think also it's important if you guys have a chance to take a look. You know, the site plans really kind of give you an idea of the really kind of size and scale of this building related to the neighborhoods. Actually, if you could go scroll for, there's a few perspectives and overviews. I took a shot from Google Earth of trying to put in the adjacent buildings to the west along against the alleyway to kind of give a idea, a sense of scale and proportion. I don't know if those are at the bottom. I just went off guessing, and you know, it was maybe not very accurate, but yeah, there you go. So those are kind of some perspectives, as one would be, the one is in center facing towards the west from the backside alleyway. Those are perspectives from kind of the southwest and then, or I mean the, southwest and in the northeast. So you can kind of see the fence and the landscape burning. This is again a perspective, an overview of what our side building is and the relationship of the buildings adjacent it towards, you know, might not have all the roof gables right and things right direction and stuff like that, but those are all kind of shown as single family homes right there.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
Rebecca, you had a question for Craig?
Craig, when we have a transportation plan and we're always trying to build connectivity through the city whenever possible. So Aaron's saying that they don't have to give us that right away if we were going to put a two-way street on 8th Street. Is that true? Like, don't
I think
we have
what,
some rights as a city?
this may be more of a legal question. I think what Aaron was referring to was, with this conditional use, the council has the ability to place conditions on the project, and one of those conditions is that they grant us the 30 feet of right-of-way we'd need to make East 8th Street a two-way road. With the other project, the, let's say, 14-unit project, council would not have the ability to condition the project, and so we would have, of course, the ability to go through some type of eminent domain process, but the city historically hasn't done that, and it's a very lengthy and costly process.
And I'm not saying we wouldn't be willing to work with the city, but right now, that is our property. So, and there's no reason or benefit other than to try to, again, improve the overall streetscape to do that, so.
Further questions for Aaron or staff before we go to public comment? I just want to remind the public that whether it's this board or any committee that is operated by the city of Whitefish, we do follow our principles for civil dialogue that we adopted in 2007. I just want to encourage that everyone has a right to their opinion, and I just ask that you respect their individual opinions, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, and that you're respectful and courteous when one is at the microphone speaking. And I just ask that you follow those basic principles of civil dialogue for us tonight. With that said, I do have a sign-up sheet for public comment. Certainly, if you didn't sign up, it doesn't mean you can't provide comment, but I'll start with the list, and we will start with Bruce Tate, and then we'll move on to Amy Boring, Tony Veseth, and Pete Sigmund, if you don't mind lining up so we can keep this as efficient as possible.
I live about 3 miles away. I'm Bruce Tate. I'm at 1800 West Lakeshore Drive, the west side of Whitefish. And I've got two major concerns. I think it's too big and too much, and the traffic just paralyzes me. I have a first grader and a third grader that are my grandsons that live at 6th and Columbia. And it's my pleasure to be able to walk them and the old dog, who is slower than I am, to down to the Muldown School. And I know traffic is roaring by there now, and I look at the size of this complex and the impact it's going to have on that, not just a block or two, but the whole zone as far as more traffic, especially during the crunch hours. And I think it's going to be a very... it's going to rob Whitefish of something that is very special, and that is it's a friendly, smaller town where people are, I think, feel safe, and they walking and bicycling are a way of life here. And if we start shoehorning in too many of the larger developments, that's going to go away. And this is right in the middle of what, 2/3 of our student body that go to the public school are ferried to and from this area. So I'm really concerned about the negative impact that many units would have. 36 is double what 18 was. I hope they could reconsider. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate your comments. Pete?
Pete Sigmund, 735 Summers Avenue. I just want to talk a little bit, something John said at the end of the last council meeting was to go back and review the conditions of approval for a conditional use permit. And I think kind of the way I was feeling, there was this kind of big weight of affordable housing that was kind of overwhelming the conversation. But I think sometimes you get focused on that and you lose sight of really what we're supposed to be looking at here. So I went back and looked up the WR4 zoning, and what's currently allowed is 7 units. I also learned that is currently allowed to build a sorority or a fraternity house here as well, which was interesting. But so that's the higher density, which is about double the density of the neighborhood just to the east or to the west of here. So I went back and I looked at the conditions of approval, and there's a whole bunch of them here. It says the criteria, and you guys probably know this, but I just think it's worth mentioning. Criteria required for consideration of a conditional use permit may be granted only if the proposal substantially conforms to all of the following criteria. I'm not going to read them all, but the few that stood out to me was number 6, neighborhood community impact. The proposed use or development will not have detrimental effects on adjacent properties, nearby neighborhoods, and the community in general. Adverse impacts may include, but are not limited to, excessive traffic generation and or infiltration of neighborhoods, noise, vibration, hours of operation, etc. Number 7, neighborhood community compatibility. The use of development is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and community in general in terms of structural and bulk massing, scale, the context of the existing neighborhood and community character, and it gives an ordinance related to that. And it says on Part K that the burden of proof that it meets all the conditions is on the applicant. And it just says the burden of proof for satisfying the aforementioned criteria considered for approval shall rest with the applicant and not the city council. The granting of a conditional use permit is a matter of grace, resting in the discretion of the council, and not a refusal is not the denial of a right. So I guess my only point is he has the right to build the 14 units, and anything above that is not, and a denial is not denying him any right that he currently exists. So again, we've beat the traffic thing. I think there's a huge difference between the 36 units and the 14. And hopefully there would be families living in the houses, and they would be able to use the proximity to the schools and walk and stuff. The apartments, they're mostly studio and single bedrooms. There's probably not going to be a lot of families using those. So anyway, thank you. And I do, one of my neighbors said at the last meeting, he really appreciated the opportunity to get up here and speak, and I do too. I've lived here for 25 years. I've never come to a city council meeting until the last one, so I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate the comments. Tony?
Tony V. Seth, 1014 8th Street. Just to start out, the developer earlier said the perception of this project, and I just really appreciate all of this perception in the room coming out tonight to support us. You've all heard everything I've had to say for over the last month, and I do too appreciate the fact that we can come together as a community, come talk to you guys, let you know how we feel about things and what the real perception is. The city staff has been phenomenal to work with. Michelle, Wendy have been phenomenal. I just want to really reiterate that as well. We really appreciate being able to even just be here. What I want to address is, where was I? The developer has come back with some counterpoints. There was in the packet this last week, he did come back with some suggestions and things that they could do. One of his quotes was, multifamily projects of this type and size already exist in this neighborhood directly across the street. The change of this lot will certainly not destroy or dramatically change how the neighborhood operates or feels to some unknown drastic point. There is multifamily in this neighborhood. It's single level to the north, to the northeast. It's barely 1.5 levels. And then the project, the apartments on Park, those are like 1.5 story units. I hate to compare the multifamily housing to the church and the school and the old folks home and that stuff. That's different purpose, different style. Come hang out in this neighborhood and look us in the eye and tell us that this won't drastically affect our neighborhood, our quality of life, and our property values. Another quote was, this project is based on doing our desired product of affordable and workforce housing for the city of Whitefish. I think the developer's representative said that there'll be 7 deed restricted in this completely affordable workforce housing project. As far as I understand it, only 7 of these need to conform with the affordable workforce housing pricing. The other 29 don't have to conform to the workforce housing affordability criteria. And correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. If they could have done this project without the affordable units, they would have. But it didn't get in before the Whitefish Legacy Homes proposal was enacted. If they were actually serious about making our community better and doing something for the community of Whitefish, this entire project would have been made affordable workforce housing, not just 7 of them. If they were really concerned about making our community better, the whole project would have been affordable, like the units on Edgewood, the Snow Lot proposal, and the new project over on Vorman. If the 36, and this is the one that's a little tougher to take, if the 36 units is not approved at this meeting, we would be forced to consider all other options and how to get this or a different type of project passed. If it was decided to move forward with the 7 units allowed per lot by right, as the neighborhood is requesting, it is important to outline what that project would look like. The units would be much larger, 2,500 square foot, 3-bedroom units with 2-car garages, and these would have a much higher rental rate to make the project that is financially viable. So basically, the developer's representative is saying, if you don't give us this, just wait and see what we'll do with the 14 lots that are available to us. Is this how business is done in 2020? Starting to feel more like the 1920s. All we have been asking for is to follow the zoning. 14 single-family homes with yards. Seems like that would still be more appealing and not a drain on our property values. Also, if you read what the community wanted for affordable workforce housing in the first place, it's not a whole bunch of 1-bedroom and studio apartments in cheap buildings. They wanted modest, single-family homes just like everybody else has. They want a yard, they want the dog, they want the cat. We've already approved plenty of apartment complexes in Whitefish. In a statement from the city, this is another quote in the revival. It is a statement from the city that they are not supporting their own inclusionary zoning program initiative. I would anticipate this be seen by developers to only consider future projects that fit the use by right without any cup and would drive development in directions that would not meet this stated goal. Yes, my point to that is, consider what is zoned and work within the zoning. We've spent all this time on the zoning. If somebody can just come in and say, hey, I bought this property, it's zoned for 14 units, but man, it'd be really cool if we could put 36 in there and bump up the profitability. The conditional use permit is not something that has to be approved. You can always deny a conditional use permit and by right, build the 14 single families that can be done there. Anyway, the council also has a difficult task in reading past the proclaimed issues, this is the quote again, of traffic density, not in my backyard. We've never said not in my backyard. We've said just stick to the zoning. We're all okay with the zoning for the 14 units. The not in my backyard thing, we all know that progress is going to happen and change is going to happen. With the development of this site from single to multifamily and the new school and parking lot location across the street, change is going to occur regardless of the unit number count. We feel it is council's right and requirement to support their own inclusionary zoning program initiative and zoning standards with an attractive, well-done project with the 36 apartment units. My reply to that is, when a project fits in the neighborhood, of course, please fill in the empty lots. Let's get some housing where it fits, where it makes sense. This location does not make sense. But when the developer disregards the facts presented by the people that live in this neighborhood, then we have a breakdown in this system. These are not proclaimed issues. These are real world, everyday issues, and if the developer actually lived in this city that he is so desperately trying to improve for the whole, he would maybe see this differently. We, the taxpayers in this neighborhood for many, many years, the same taxpayers who voted for all of you sitting up there today, and the same taxpayers who live and work and take such pride in our community, respectfully request that the city of Whitefish deny this CUP proposal. We all know growth is inevitable, but there is nothing wrong with slowing the process down and being thoughtful about the legacy that you all will be voting on tonight and will leave behind for our kids and our grandkids. Please represent us, the people, the grit of this town. Don't give in to every developer's proposal, and please just send this one back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Who's next?
Sorry, I thought she was going next. I would have been in line. Josh Smith, 1012 8th Street East. I do appreciate the changes that have been made. However, the biggest change that needed to be made was the total density of the project. As Tony said, we're all good with 14. You know, and it's obvious that if it weren't for affordable housing, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion about putting 36 units in there. To date, I personally haven't heard at any of these discussions pricing of what these affordable housing units would cost. That's surprising, and it seems like it'd make it tough for you guys to make an informed decision. You know, do we want to go against the mass bulk of public comment and vote for this thing, and we really don't know what we're getting into? If you knew a price, if it was going to be a really outstanding deal and really good workforce housing, maybe. But it just seems like it's tough for you guys to make that decision. So maybe in the future, that would be, you know, something that you could require of the developer so that you guys could make a good decision. Final note, I said this at the planning board meeting, but not last week. You know, the kids that are walking these streets are the elementary school kids. And we talked about how they're the most vulnerable of the kids walking to school. These are the kids navigating already horrible traffic. You know, and my daughter's 7, and she walks with a group of 1st to 3rd graders. So I just put that in your mind too. What we're asking is not high school kids to navigate this increased traffic and already a bad situation, but the elementary school students, you know, 1st to 4th grade. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Josh. Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Larson, 725 Summers Avenue. This room is full of your neighbors, your constituents, the folks who just voted for you, some of you for the first time. This is your first opportunity to represent us, and we are here to tell you over and over in every way we can think of that this proposed plan is wrong for our neighborhood. It's wrong by the criteria that you have set forth in your growth policy, in your code. We've been discussing the transportation problems over and over. Those are the ones that I am the most concerned about as the parent of one of those small children who walks to school every single day. And I don't know how there can really even be a thought that it's no big deal to increase from 14 to 36 units. I mean, that's a jump to probably 70 cars. And I don't know how with a straight face anyone can say that that won't have an impact on the already dangerous traffic situation that these kids have to navigate every single morning. Anecdotally, there was a fender bender on the corner of my block, which is 7th and Summers, just last week. My daughter and I had to kind of scoot out of the way to avoid being hit by a parent pulling into the church parking lot for parking a few years ago. And these are things these kids deal with every single morning. There will be another 70 cars piled on top of this existing problem. This project is it's also incompatible with the neighborhood. The density in bulk, perhaps it will be the same if we have just the 14 units, but it's not going to threaten the small town feel that we have the way the 36 units will. As one of my neighbors pointed out, I think as a city, you've already identified that the affordable housing that our community is looking for is single-family homes, not necessarily the apartments that we already have all over the city. Certainly, this developer could provide the single-family homes that he's already proposed, and the city could require that some of those, if he's concerned about affordable housing, he could make some of those deed restricted as well. The current zoning, clearly, I think you can see by the presence of the people here in this room, it is inconsistent with the existing character and density of the neighborhood, but there's nothing we can do about that. The builder is entitled to his 14 units. We're asking you over and over, please don't increase it to 36. Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. Going through the list, I had Brian, Gloria, Greg.
I am not Ryan, Gloria, or Greg.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm Holly Hunsberger at 574 Summers Avenue. I have been fortunate enough to attend the planning board meeting back in December and the first city council meeting on this topic back in January, and now tonight's meeting. I'm very grateful to live in a place where democracy is alive and mostly well. The 3 to 4 points that I will speak to tonight aren't groundbreaking new topics or revelations, any sort of new revelation, but simply a reiteration of the topics of concern that you've already heard. So first off, just a geographical reminder of the immediate surroundings of this proposed project. So directly to the east, we have a church parsonage, and we have a church directly to the east. We have 2 preschools, one of which my son, who is about to be 3, is attending right now. Directly to the south, we have the Whitefish Community School and the Whitefish Christian Academy. Directly to the west, we have 5 single-family homes that are proposed to be only a mere few feet away from this proposed project. We have Summers Avenue, which is residential housing, Columbia Avenue, residential housing, Kalispell Avenue, residential housing. To the north, we have a set of townhomes, and we also have the old Whitefish Alternative School turned apartments that a previous neighbor of mine addressed at a previous meeting, so I will not go there. The Whitefish City Council has every right to vote to approve this project to gain the minuscule number of affordable housing units, which is 7.4, towards their Legacy Homes program. But the Whitefish City Council also has an obligation to listen to the concerned Whitefish citizens like us here tonight that already have invested in the Whitefish community by purchasing homes, paying taxes, and voting in elections like the ones that got all of you elected. Whitefish currently has a growth and infrastructure issue. I really feel that the Whitefish City Council needs to be more thoughtful and sensible in the approving of projects of this nature. I personally think trading one problem, affordable housing, for another problem, which is a capacity issue, is not the very most reasonable way to approach doing quality business. Regardless of tonight's vote outcome, I do think the Whitefish City Council will start to see an increase in my age demographic voicing concern regarding the direction of our community of Whitefish. Thanks for all of your time and your commitment to keeping Whitefish great. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the comments. Who's next? Brian.
Hello, Brian Jose, 711 Park Avenue. I'd like to begin by reading just one sentence to you from the Whitefish City Code, but it's very much applicable to what we're doing here tonight. The sentence reads as follows. A conditional use permit may be granted only if the proposal substantially conforms to all of the following criteria standards. All of the standards. I wrote a letter that was in your packet, starts at page 286, and in 6 pages of excruciating detail, I go through how this project does not comply with 14 of those 32 criteria. The developer has made some great changes here. However, by my count, that still leaves 11, about a third of the criteria that this project does not substantially comply with. This means you're required to deny the conditional use permit. Let me go into one example. We've been through a lot of these, but I'll go through this example because it's kind of sitting on the board next to you. It's nice to look at guesswork and artistic renderings, but I have some numbers. I went to the Montana Cadastral, and I looked up what the square footage, the average square footage of the single-family homes that border this proposed development are. The average square footage of those homes is 1,430.6 feet. The square footage of this project, without the common area that's been eliminated, is over 32,000 square feet. Now you look at me and tell me that that's compatible. It's not. You know, this project is just too big, too dense. It's already in a traffic-stressed and safety-stressed corridor where the infrastructure is a burden beyond what it can handle. And it's being crammed in there, I think, against the wishes of the community that you're seeing here, that you guys are seated here, elected to represent and to protect the interests of. And why? Why is it being crammed in? Well, so a developer can make a bit of money, and so we can get affordable housing. But let's talk about this affordable housing. 80% of these units are by definition not affordable. 80%. Only 6 of them, or 6 or 7, are deed restricted affordable units. And what does that affordable mean? If you look at the Legacy Homes program, it means that those are affordable to people making 70% of the median income in Whitefish. That means that 69% of the people in Whitefish will not be able to afford even the deed-restricted units in this complex. And this is going to solve our workforce and affordable housing problem. I don't think it even makes a dent. It's been mentioned before, but the affordable housing study, which I went back and reviewed, outlines the type of affordable housing that we need in Whitefish. And what it said was, we need single-family homes, modest single-family homes with garage or storage. Do you see that in this project? Because I don't. It's not there. I think you guys have a pretty easy choice here. It may not seem that way sitting where you are, but this project doesn't meet the requirements outlined by the city code. No one in the community wants it, absent the developer, and it doesn't provide what the community needs in affordable housing. So I think the clear answer is no. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll consider what I've said here tonight.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the comments. Folks, with all due respect, if you could just refrain from clapping and cheering out of respect for the process, I'd appreciate it. Ma'am.
Hi, Gloria Nelson, 547 Blanchard Lake Road. I'm here as a Moldown parent tonight, and Aaron talked about that change is inevitable in our community, and we all know that. And 14 units is a huge change already for this community. It's going from a single home to 14, and we know change is happening. But to grant a conditional use permit for 36 homes as a Moldown parent, I feel is just really astronomical effect on the traffic situation. And I just wanted to share some numbers with you tonight, personal numbers. We live out Caro, and typically it takes me 10 minutes to get from my house to Moldown. In the morning, I have to allow 25 minutes if I leave at 8:05. If I leave after 8:05, then it's 35 minutes for me to get from my house to Moldown because we're sitting in a line of traffic and my kids are tardy for school. You can go out any morning and you can count the number of cars of kids that are tardy to school because we can't get there. And so to add 70 more cars to that just seems crazy. The other number is one day I was trying to pick up my child from school and they called me after 10 minutes because she was being taken to the office because I was late and I was sitting on Asher at the stop sign, could not get to school, and I counted 39 cars on 7th, not moving. It took me another 15 minutes to get to school. So this is the type of neighborhood and impact we're talking about when we're looking at adding possible 70 cars to this area that's congested with 7th Street as a one-way street. I mean, not one-way, a dead-end street is the problem. So in my opinion, until we alleviate the traffic problem and the dead-end street, then we just can't have an increased density of 36 homes. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. Who's next? Sure, step on up.
Greg Loberg, I live at 707 Park Avenue on the alley adjacent to the project. First of all, I'd like to echo the opinions that I do appreciate the developers' changes with the lower roof heights, are in favor, or not in favor of the one-way alley, which I appreciate because that is my way to get out to the city streets. And I like to be able to go both directions. And I sympathize with everybody that does drive. I've observed for many, many years the parents trying to get down 7th Street to Muldown, and I've seen like they are starting a little bit earlier and earlier, and going a little later, especially now with the weather being a little bit more inclement. I'd like to make a comparison. We live in 5 single dwelling houses on the west side of the alley for the city block between 7th and 8th. And you're, even if they do 14 houses, that's pretty much triple on the other. And if you take that as a city block with the alley being the dividing point, you're tripling the amount of living space on the east side as compared to the west side. So even without the 36 units, it's still quite a big leap in the neighborhood configuration as far as I can say. And I do appreciate our opportunity to talk to all of you, and I hope you take our comments with a grain of salt and maybe help influence your decision. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate your comments tonight. Further public testimony on this item?
Hi, my name is Darcy Davidson, and I live on 5th and Columbia. And I work at the Montessori school. I'm a teacher there, and I have a first grader who goes to Muldown, as well as a 7th grader. My main concern is the density, as well as the traffic. This summer, me and my children got to witness a boy getting hit by a car on Columbia and 5th. And I had to call 911, and he was okay, but it already is such a scary, high-density traffic situation that when my kids are walking to school or walking to and from my neighbor's house who they play with and cross the street, I feel like I can't let even my 12-year-old cross without standing on the porch and double checking. So, and working at the Montessori, I'm not even required to be there till 8 in the morning, but I choose to go at 7:30 so I don't have to deal with the traffic. So I go half an hour early every day that I don't get paid for, so I don't have to deal with the traffic. So those are definitely some current concerns I have, utilizing that neighborhood daily. And so that's just where I'm coming from. So thank you for hearing that, and that's it.
Thanks, Darcy.
Hi, I'm John Fleming, 622 Park Avenue, right at the corner of 7th and Park. Been there since 1988, raised my three girls, and there was a time when we could play flag football out in the street and wouldn't have to worry about the kids going across the street. And now I have 2 grandkids, and I got to keep an eye on them 24/7, you know, because of traffic and the speed is so bad. And my suggestion would be, before we do anything in this area, 6th Avenue should be, or not 6th Avenue, but 6th Street should be improved. There should be sidewalks there. All the roads that are going to our schools should be priority before we even think about adding more population to this area. Most of the traffic comes down 7th Street, and so the traffic is terrible. And I've watched, you know, I like to front porch sit, and I really don't like to do it anymore because, you know, the traffic and the speed, and I just get stressed out. People on their cell phones. Our neighbor kid came that close to getting hit by a car that was speeding through. There is a 4-way on Columbia, but for some reason, there's no 4-way on the street coming up next, and then on our intersection, where most of the kids walk to school. You know, the most important street as far as going to school doesn't have crosswalks, doesn't have 4-way stops. There's nothing there that slows the traffic down. There's not even a speed bump. So these are things that I would suggest that are done before we even think about increasing the population in that area. And also, just right across the street, they put in a little, like a month-by-month rental. It used to be the alternative school. And we were promised that there wouldn't be any cars. It's mostly going to be for students that are coming to our country to work in the area, and they'd have a place where they could stay. And that's now turned into kind of a flop house. Geez, I had a guy, and I'm sitting out front, and I had a guy laying out on the grass, stoned or drunk, rolling around in the grass. We have them out smoking, throwing their butts on the street. And there's a designated area. We complain for 2 days, maybe they might go smoke in the back, but then they're back again. And then F-bombs and any cuss words you can imagine are flying right across the street from my grandkids. So this is what has started to come to our neighborhood. And then you have the 5 people that are butted up against this project. And I just feel bad because their real estate property is probably going to drop just because of this. And they've been there forever, longer than I have. So I just suggest that before we even think about adding anything new to this area, take care of 6th Street, get some sidewalks in there and make that an area where people can drive to school. 5th Street, 4th Street, 3rd Street, these are streets that should have been done high priority first, but they never were. So that's my thoughts, and I hope you take that into consideration when you make your decision. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the comments. Further public testimony tonight.
Marie Fleming, 622 Park Ave, John's wife. First, I just realized we moved there in '88, so we were the dead-end street. So don't say, I change. We're on, our second mall down. The boarding house is the fourth thing that's been since we've been there. No one has a backyard anymore because we've crammed every garage apartment there is possible. I really want you to understand, it's not just the speeding during school. It's not the traffic just that time. It's all the time. Because 7th Street is the only way people go home to go to Cow Creek or whatever you call it, Asher Apartments, anywhere behind the high school. Either 2nd Street, or 7th Street, because you don't have to stop. There's not one stop sign on that street. So it's a straight shot down. Now, I did a study of my own. It took 12 minutes for 10 cars to go down my street from 1:15 in the afternoon to 15 minutes later on a Sunday. So this whatever percent wrong, there's at least 50 cars down that street a day. I'm betting no 50 cars go past your house per day. And I get it, where we live. But let's keep in mind how much we've already shoved in there. Thanks.
Thanks, Marie. Appreciate the comments. Leo.
Hello, I'm Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place. So about 1.5 miles away from this proposal. I really can't add anything beyond the eloquent statements that have been made already, very well put by everyone. And being 1.5 miles away, I don't have concerns about the traffic there necessarily, but I am concerned about the direction Whitefish is going. I feel as though, for those of us who live here, quality of life is rapidly eroding. I think we've reached the limits to growth. I think the town does have a carrying capacity, the number of people that can comfortably live here, and I think we're getting there. It's getting to be a big city with big city problems, and we're still packed into a little community. And I would like to see it stay a little community to some extent. I think the ability to build on this property, some single-family homes, maybe a couple multifamily, if that's allowed in the zoning, would be just fine, and that would fit comfortably with the neighborhood as well as with the community and slow down the growth a little bit. I think I could say in the last 2 years, this council and the previous council has approved probably 6 multifamily units or complexes, and some very large, larger than this. And I think that is leading to the detriment of our town. And I think it's time for the council to really start looking at the big picture and thinking longer term. I think we've had, we tackle these things one at a time. We need to be thinking about what's happening for the next generation coming up behind us. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Appreciate the comments. Further public testimony on this item. Sir.
Hi, my name is Steve Sullivan. I live on 1637 2nd Street. I just want to remind you that a few years ago, we've, in our neighborhood, faced a similar situation about an apartment proposed complex on 2nd Street and Armory on the Kaufman property. They also proposed a large apartment complex. As you folks have done, we as a neighborhood rose up and said, it's not zoned for this. There's a reason for the zoning. There was some planning that was a planning that was done to set that zoning. And the fact is, we got the same song and dance about, no, it's not going to affect the traffic. It's not going to affect this. It's inevitable. And we were able to convince the developer that it wasn't a good idea. And as you probably well know, that proposal was withdrawn, and also now it's been developed as it should have been, as it was planned. And we had the same, we didn't have any objections to them developing a single family situation, which is now there pretty much installed. So I don't see any reason why the council should deviate from what they've done in the past. It's worked pretty well for us, and it's not that far away from this. So I think there should be some consistency in what is built in this town, and following that model, they should stick with the existing zoning. And I would suggest that the developer withdraw and start again and do the same thing that happened in our situation. So anyway, I hope that's what happens with you guys.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the comments. Who's next? Further public comment tonight on this item? Cami.
Hi there, I'm Kamisha Sautel. I live at 239 Summers Avenue. And I just wanted to briefly say, in agreement with the other members of the community that have spoken so eloquently here tonight, that I really strongly encourage you to deny this CUP. In fact, according to Mr. Joe's analysis, you're obligated to deny this CUP. This is just too much for this proposed space. Thanks.
Thanks, Kamisha.
Hi, I am Christine Rossi, 1020 Creekview Drive. Thank you for your time this evening. I would like to strongly echo the public's concerns about developing a high-density project like this one. Right now, the area is currently dangerously congested at school drop-off and pickup, but not just school drop-off and pickup, like another person said. During special events at Muldown, which are fairly frequent, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of parking issues. I'm worried about safety, first and foremost. I've personally witnessed, like so many others, elementary school students who have almost been hit by cars at that intersection more than once. And then what happens when you add additional people running late to work, running late to school? There's a higher chance for accidents. When school's not in session, there's still a significant number of pedestrians, kids and families on bikes. More traffic means more distracted drivers and higher accidents. In the Creekwood area where I live, there's a lot of families, young children on their bikes running around. There's already a concern about traffic in the neighborhood. We see cars racing through stop signs every day, and we know that the new Trailview development is going to increase traffic a bit, and with the addition of this project, neighbors are worried. Not to mention the overall infrastructure of both our neighborhood and the other neighborhood streets around the schools and the proposed development. They're not meant to handle high traffic. And there's another individual who talked about, instead of spending money on a project like this, let's look at the existing infrastructure and try to fix some of those problems before we move on. But first and foremost, I would encourage you to think about the safety of the children and the families in those areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
Susan Wheeler, 325 4th Street East, Columbia Falls. As a young professional and someone who originally moved to Whitefish and fell in love with the community and wanted to continue to live here, I eventually got priced out, and now I live in Columbia Falls. I purchased a house there because they were about $100,000 cheaper in Columbia Falls than Whitefish. And I would love if these developments were single-family affordable houses, but the truth is there's very little incentive for developers to do any affordable housing at all, because everyone wants to live here. And like the new Alta development, that was supposed to be affordable housing, those are priced over $300,000. There's no way a young professional could afford that. So I think this is a small step in the right direction. It might be hard to see the change in the neighborhood, but I think it is taking a step in the right direction. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Further public testimony tonight.
I'm Danielle Ruther, and I'm at 447 Caro. I have kids in Moldown and the high school, and my children have been in Moldown, the middle school, Whitefish Christian Academy, and now in the high school. And I'm afraid to let my young children walk around that neighborhood because the traffic is so bad. Affordable housing would be great. I'm a single parent with 3 kids. I don't want to live there. Who wants to live in that type of environment with their children? Like, that does not sound safe to me. And we came back to Whitefish for a safe place to live. I know most of you from the time that I worked at the Wave. When you look at the numbers, they tell a story, but don't forget the faces behind the stories and the numbers. Like, we've done so much in Whitefish with the nonprofit community, and there's so much opportunity. Excuse me. Affordable housing is a hard one for me because I would like to see it, but I think that we need to be careful what we bring into Whitefish because it doesn't always end well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Danielle.
My name is Carrie Lamb. I live at 415 Columbia Avenue. I'm also the Children's Activities Director at the Wave. My concerns for this, we walk our children to school every day. I'm always trying to think about when they're old enough to go on their own, what route would they take? I'm not sure that having them go this way would be that, but another thing that comes to mind is in the summertime, we use this route for the Wave Summer Camp. We take up to 20 kids out on bikes, and I'm always trying to think of what's the safest way through town. I've lived here my whole life, so I have a good idea of where there's traffic and not. We ride this way to get to the park, to get to the basketball courts, to get up to the dirt bike park, to get out to the Armory building. And I know that we give them designated spots to stop and catch up, and this is just along our route, and I would hate to see it change a good thing that we have for our community, for our children, that I use. It would affect me going out on bikes with kids. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Sarah Thorman, 709 Park Avenue. I wanted to add something to what Brian Josh said. Affordable housing is what's been being thrown out here over and over and over again. There are only 7 units that are affordable housing. The other 7 units are very much unaffordable housing. In the city of Whitefish, when I came here, I worked in all of the industries that we're talking about that have workers that need help and need affordable housing. I worked 3 jobs, raised 2 kids, and I bought the house that I bought at an affordable price. And I worked 3 jobs to keep the house. And I still work 2 jobs to keep the house. These complexes, $1,200, $900, $800. I don't know of anybody that can afford that. If you make $8.50 an hour, full-time, shift work, you got to have at least a third only towards rent. That's $400. If you make $10.50 an hour and work full-time, your third of your rent should be $460. So what's $15 going to make? And can they afford $1,200? So with that thought, there's not going to be a lot of families that are going to move into this. So your 2-bedroom homes are going to be people like roomies. Let's go online, find a roommate, and we'll have 4 people in that place, which then adds to your traffic. It also adds to the community of a hive. In a housing, in a neighborhood, you've got open spaces. You can see when somebody's breaking into your neighbor's yard, and you can call. If you have open housing, you can see when somebody's getting in trouble or having problems with their kids or their family. In a hive, people hide in a hive. And you're asking this place to move in around 5, 6 different institutions for our most vulnerable population in Whitefish, children. And then the second most vulnerable, the elderly and the disabled. And so you're asking to move an environment that is not conducive to community activity into a community around all of these vulnerable populations. And that scares me. That makes me sad. I like the changes. I know we need affordable housing, but 29 of these units are not affordable housing. You're going to have 2 people in the studios, you're going to have 2 to 3 people in the 1 bedrooms, and you're going to have 4 people in the 2 bedrooms. People cannot afford that kind. If they could, they'd buy a house, but oh yes, guess what? We don't have affordable houses. So the real problem is that you're looking at and you're getting anxious about filling a quota for affordable housing, and 29 of those units aren't. So like they said, let him make 14 and make all 14 of them affordable. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. Further testimony this evening. Rob.
She tried to make me stay in my chair and I couldn't. So I just want to point out the elephant in the middle of the room, I think, is the Legacy Homes project. And same gal that couldn't keep me in my chair, she'll laugh when I say, you know, it's tough to admit when you're wrong. But that program is wrong right now. It doesn't have to stay wrong, but it's led a developer down a path that obviously the city doesn't, the community doesn't want, or at least the residents. The organizational chart that I see posted on most City of Whitefish websites and propaganda has the citizens of Whitefish at the top. And here we are. We were kind of kept out of the Legacy Homes project development, and this is the result. It has been alleged, threatened, whatever. The developers are watching this project to see what's going to happen. I am so glad that they are. I hope they'll somehow know how many of us are here. So the lack of public input that occurred in the drafting of that proposal is happening now, and I think it's going to continue. So I just would hope you all keep that in mind and listen to our testimony and vote with your hearts. I was ready to counter an argument from what I believe is in the offing from the city attorney about a ruling that a petition requesting a supermajority vote from you folks to approve this, and I'm not going to go through. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I don't know how the argument could go that way, because it obvious to me is that it's a change in a zoning situation. That's what a CUP is. But I really hope that it doesn't come to that. I really hope that you vote to deny this project outright. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Bill Goldberg, 1240 Birch Point Drive. I'm not going to speak necessarily directly to the project, but I think it's a good time to think about this project. I've been watching it because obviously looking at what other potential developments could come into the area with, you know, the affordable housing being the key line each time of saying what can we build to accomplish those units. Don't quote me on this, but in discussion with Aaron, I think this could have been proposed, I think, what, 64 units initially? If you go with all of the incentives, which obviously I got heavily involved with the discussions with the inclusionary program, where I think the public that's here now, many of them were not at those meetings, and they don't understand all of that dialogue that happened and what was laid out as an incentive program for developers to acquire the additional density. That if this project would have been proposed with 64 units, what would the public outcry be then? I'm not suggesting that it should be approved either. I have no dog in the fight with the project. It's like, but I think there are developers, like the gentleman just mentioned, watching this project and seeing how this process initially proposed as an administrative CUP, which we used as a avenue to say, okay, that streamlines the process. It gets bumped up into full CUP, which I find interesting. And now it's here where everybody's vocalizing their concerns, which that's the purpose of this process. But I think you're going to see more and more of these types of projects come down the pike, because when we're running those numbers to try to meet that inclusionary program, we do target that higher density. This one, ironically enough, not shot to the full max, which I think would have been a big problem, but 38 units seems like the compromise. I'm not forgetting about the neighbors, because I understand the traffic concerns, I do, but I think as the overall think about what's going to be coming down with some future projects, because you're going to see this more and more.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate your comments.
Corey Utterback, 802 Columbia Avenue. I was wrestling as far as whether or not I was going to speak. My wife basically was like, yeah, probably shouldn't at this point in time. Everything's been said. But I got to thinking about what I could add to it. And it's a little bit of an anecdote, I suppose. And then just going to leave everybody for their, obviously your decision's yours. Not obligated to do anything at this point in time. You guys are going to make the decision you feel is best. But we are on the corner of 8th and Columbia, right in the epicenter of all of that traffic. And I'm not going to talk about safety at this point in time, although it is an issue and it's been talked to death, no pun intended, tonight. What I do want to talk about is we just went through a similar process to build a garage apartment of our own. And I'm seeing some very friendly and some familiar faces. And we were zoned, of course, for a single unit dwelling. And we jumped through all the hoops, went through all the steps. And I'm wondering if we had asked to have a couple more units in our backyard, how that would have gone. I'm wondering, and I think I know what the answer would have been. It would have been no, because of the impact to the neighborhood, because of the impact to your neighbors. We would have been told no, and rightly so. I'm going to echo what everybody else said today. And for me, this is boiled down to, it's a matter of what the area is zoned for at this point in time. And you're not obligated to do anything. I'm not telling you how to vote. I can't do that. But I do think that some incredible folks tonight have made some incredible points. And that includes counterpoints to the argument I'm making now. Some incredibly brave things have been said tonight. But I think that the majority of the Whitefish community is against this. And they should be against it because of the impact it's going to have on utilities, traffic, everything down the line. There's a lot of money that was put into those zoning regulations. And I bring it back to the garage apartment that we're building right now. We have a very specific amount of space that we can take up. We have a very specific amount of, a very specific thing that we can do with our property. And I think it applies here too. So, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much for your comments. Further public testimony tonight. Laurel.
Laurel Grady, 520 Columbia Avenue. I just want to go on record saying that I echo the objections that were verbalized tonight about the project density. Change may be inevitable, but change for the sake of change or for the sake of profit does not have to be inevitable.
Thanks, Laurel. Rhonda.
Good evening. Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. I think that it's important to the community that we do grapple with the affordable housing issue. And we have in the plan that's adopted over 30 tools to achieve that eventually. And it's going to take a little bit of everything to get there. It's not just about one thing or one neighborhood. And I think that this project, oddly, because it's not an affordable housing project, has been brought to you as sort of the poster child for the whole program. This is a non-affordable housing project of 29 units, mystery price, that's required by the new regulations to include 7 affordable units. But it's not an affordable housing project, and I think it's been characterized as that over and over again, including tonight, which is giving the program a really black eye, because people are saying, I think I'm against affordable housing because the character of our community will be changed radically. All these neighborhoods where the people who live and work here live are going to be eroded by the affordable housing program. It's exactly the converse of the intention. And I think that the neighborhood character, which is required to be compatible by the growth policy, is a super essential fact. This is the Whitefish community. These are people who own small businesses and employ other people. These are the employees of these small businesses. This is Whitefish. This is who we need housing for. We need more small, modest, single family for purchase homes. And this piece of property could accommodate 14, or if you did them as townhomes or row houses, perhaps 16 or 18 or 20 even, which the neighborhood would be perfectly good with. It's just this thing isn't affordable and is giving the program, which I believe in sincerely, a really black eye. So I hope that everyone will step back and say, wait, what is it that we're really trying to achieve here? And recognize that part of the reason it's not spelled out more clearly in the affordable housing inclusionary zoning ordinance is that it has to be compatible with the neighborhood, is because it's called out in the growth policy. The safeguards for the neighborhood were in the growth policy requirements, so they weren't verbalized again in the document, is my understanding. And this does not meet many of the criteria for approval, as Brian Juice pointed out. So I just hope that it can be understood that this is not an affordable housing project. This is a development which is required to provide a small amount of affordable housing. Every new project that will come to you has to have a small amount of affordable housing. That doesn't make them affordable housing projects. And if you approve this one because you're getting some affordable housing, the logical extrapolation is that you have to approve every project that comes to you if it has the required 20% affordable. 80% not affordable, you get because you have to give 20% affordable. I don't think it's a bargain that we want to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhonda. Last call for public comment. Any further public testimony tonight? I knew there was one out there.
It makes me so nervous. Amy Boring, 46, Hidden Cedar Loop, Columbia Falls. I'm a grown adult, and I don't want to live in that. I want a house. And that's it.
Thanks, Amy.
I wasn't going to talk either, but I actually rent, and my name's Dana, and I'm at 440 Columbia Avenue, and I have 3 kids, and my husband works really hard to be able to afford for us to live in Whitefish. Very, very hard. And we cannot afford to live here and buy a home, and that's okay. Whitefish is what it is. It's a huge, beautiful place to live, and people want to live here. Prices are always going to go up as long as it stays beautiful. And that makes me not want to live here at all. And I would love to stay on the avenues, but if those are the kinds of buildings that are going to start going up, I'll go to Columbia Falls. We can trade places.
Thanks, Dana.
I'm Cheryl Wilder at 209 Colorado Avenue. I also work at Muldown. I am the recipient of Whitefish Housing Authority and own my house. It is affordable housing. There's nothing wrong with affordable housing. I mean, I'm a good person, I carry a job, and we need to have more people that are for affordable housing and be able to have people stay in Whitefish, work in Whitefish, and be able to enjoy the community that we have. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think it's Aspen Apartments or whatever that has been built, or Alto Apartments across the street from myself. They quote that they're affordable housing. Their studios start at $900. They're empty. They have been for rent and trying to get people in there since they built it. And it's a big eyesore. So I just wanted to put that out there, that there is a differentiating, and I think all the new projects have to have this affordable housing clause in there. That's the only way they're going to get their projects put forth. But it's not affordable. So I just wanted you to let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
My name is Dean. I live on 845 Park Avenue. And the thing I just hadn't seen addressed tonight was turnover with these units. I work in real estate. Typical homeownership's 5 to 7 years, even on the low end. With even, say, 30 units, you're looking at, in a 10-year span, 30 different families living there. With apartments, typically 1 to 2 years span. And so over a 10-year period, you've got, 36 times 5, that number of families coming in and out of the neighborhood. I was really surprised when I saw the development, if it was condos that people were buying, investing in the neighborhood. I think that's what Whitefish needs. I don't think that an apartment building with that much turnover and that many different people right across from an elementary school makes a lot of sense to me. But thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Further comments from the public? Not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and we're going to adjourn for about 7 minutes, and we'll reconvene at about 10 of 9, and we'll move swiftly to our discussions. Folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. If folks could take their seats, please. So we're back in order, and we're on item 6A, and we've closed the public hearing. I'm going to turn it back to council now for discussion. I would prefer there to be a motion either up or down to initiate our deliberations, but I know first Steve has some questions he would like to ask staff.
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first one kind of is for Craig, I think. And it's about traffic calming on 7th Street. Is there anything in the world that goes along with plowing that we could use over there to slow traffic down?
That goes along with plowing?
Well, yeah,
Like
because
snow removal?
speed bumps don't really work with plowing.
Yeah, well, speed bumps are a traffic calming measure that the city has not referred to in the past.
Right.
For a variety of reasons. Oftentimes, speed bumps create additional speed in between bumps. They slow down emergency vehicles in their response. They create detriment to underlying utilities, and so we haven't done speed bumps in the past. 7th Street really does act as an arterial or a collector street, especially during those busy morning and afternoon drop-off and pickups, and so that's the reason that you don't have four-way stops along 7th between Columbia and Pine. And so, you know, there could be a reduced speed limit with some additional, you know, speed limit signs and perhaps some heads-up displays, but there's really not a whole lot we do in 25-mile-an-hour zones to calm traffic.
Okay, thank you. My next question is either for Dave or Wendy. So if this doesn't get approved and the developer goes to develop by right, what does that do for any affordable housing in this project?
They could just be required to have a building permit, and they could do 7 units per lot, and there would be no requirement for affordable housing.
So the 20% rule doesn't apply if you,
anything
I should
that's
probably
used by
know
right.
that, but this is partly for benefit of the audience, I think.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question I have is that there's been a lot made of how 36 is too dense. And because of the inclusionary zoning ordinance, we have greatly reduced what is allowable by right. Is that correct?
Yeah, that we didn't have a limit of the number of units in the R4. It was basically based on the amount of parking you could provide and the setback requirements and all that.
Okay, so with lots of that size, what roughly could have been developed? Because I think we can't make these decisions in a vacuum. We have to think about what is, you know, we're really new into the IZ process, and I just need to clarify in my mind a little bit.
Go ahead, Wendy.
According to the PUD chapter, without any sort of density bonuses, they could do 38 dwelling units per acre, which is 62 units on this lot. But that's the maximum, and then they still have to meet all the city standards like parking and setbacks and lot coverage and stormwater, and landscaping, so they may not realize that full 62, but that would be the maximum for this property.
Under a PUD or CUP?
Well, just we have a density table for
Okay.
PUD, and it's with and without the density bonus, and this is just the flat zoning.
Okay. But what I was getting at, I think, was that we really reduced the amount of by right construction in that zone when we went to the affordable, when we adopted the inclusionary zoning. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah, we reduced it from that limit down to 7 units as a use by right, and then up to 18 units as an administrative conditional use permit, which was still something that staff would approve without going to a public hearing. We would just have the opportunity to place conditions on there to mitigate impacts.
Okay, and that was done as kind of this trade-off.
Yep.
Between wanting to allow a more streamlined process for developers while still getting some
Still
affordable-
capturing things in our
in affordable
legacy
housing.
homes program, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Any further questions? Steve? Again, my preference to move this along would be to have a motion either for or against, and we'll see if we get a second. and we can have discussions from there. Rebecca?
I'd like to make a motion to deny WCUP 19-24.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Quinnell. Rebecca, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. I appreciate council and the community for giving me 2 more weeks to figure out some things. I wanted to research the problems, so I called the principal of the high school to see if there were situations that could improve the traffic, and so there are some ideas for improving the traffic in this area that I'm going to be working on. I think that I can on my own, right? And we'll try to figure out something that will help the community at large. I'm not going to vote for it with this much public opposition. I think if nobody had showed up, it would have been a good project for this site. I think the developer did listen to the problems and try to mitigate the massing and the scale. I like it when we have more connectivity through the city in terms of roads and access. But I just think in the end we represent the people that live here, and so if there's a major outcry against it, that's the priority for me.
Thanks, Rebecca. Further discussion or comments on the motion? Steve?
Yeah, I kind of have a lot because I think this is a really important development. It's an important project because it, first of all, it's our first bite of the apple at inclusionary zoning, the ordinance that we just passed last summer. And I've been a champion for affordable housing for a long time, and so has the city. And this is our first chance to really put our money where our mouth is with respect to affordable housing. I think need to clear up a couple things about it and then about the WR4 zone and why this area is zoned WR4. First of all, we want people to walk in Whitefish. We do, because that fits in with our sustainability plan. And having WR4 near a school and close to town is where we want big, dense projects. And cost of an apartment at market rate is much more affordable than single-family homes at market rate, as anybody who's tried to buy a single-family home in Whitefish can attest. And we will never get to our affordable housing goals by building a bunch of single-family home developments because we can't, even with 20% of new developments, we can't get enough units. I think there's some conflicting information about what people want. There are other apartment complexes in certain areas where the studios go right away because that's what people want, partly because they're affordable and partly because that's what they need. And we heard from the planning director that what we get by right here is we get no affordable housing with this unit, by denying this. And the developer is clearly ready to move on to something that he can do without having to come back through this process because it's onerous. And that was a constant refrain that we heard from developers when we went through the IZ process of finding some way that we could require affordable housing. And the other thing about affordable housing, and this goes back to a comment that Tony Veseth made in our planning board meeting about grit. And the reason why we have a lot of grit in this town is because people like me, and probably like Tony, I don't know him that well, were able to find places to live when we moved here so that we could build a life for ourselves here and eventually afford to own a home here. And fortunately, people like me got in when you could still do that. And we are losing that grit because those people are continuously not choosing to live in Whitefish. With all of that said, I cannot comfortably sit up here and think that I would want this project in my neighborhood. And I live in a neighborhood that is not zone WR4, but it's zone WR2. Similar things could happen like that in my neighborhood. The developer mentioned that there's no magic in the number of 36, but there actually is some magic in the 36 number of why it's 36 units. And that is the magic number whereby you do not have to go through this process where you can get an administrative CUP, potentially, based on the inclusionary zoning regulation that we passed. So that's why it's at 36. And this is where I think that the council needs to take a leadership role. And it's our job to say what is too dense in certain areas. It's our job to say that we shouldn't feel like we are held hostage by offers of increased right-of-way. And we certainly have to pay attention to the issues of each particular area as they come through. And in this place, 36 additional apartments is too dense. So I will not be voting for this ordinance, and I do thank the developer, Aaron, for listening to the people around you, and I think you do a really good job of that. I've seen lots of your projects, and I appreciate it. I'm just not going to support this one. So,
Andy.
I apologize for not being here on the 6th. Thank you for keeping the public hearing open. Kind of, no. I did watch the tape, and I just want to comment on a couple of things that were said 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to comment on a couple of things that are said tonight. I will be supporting Rebecca's motion. I've pretty much supported most every motion to deny large buildings in the last couple of years, so I kind of have to be consistent. And I think there were a couple things said tonight. First of all, I'll start last week, or 2 weeks ago. One of the comments was made that with the new ordinance, i.e. the inclusionary zoning, the legacy housing program, there should not be this much debate. That's almost a direct quote. Interestingly enough, there precisely should be this amount of debate, and it's the inclusionary zoning, it's the legacy housing program that allowed this debate to happen. Even though that's what we got beat up for, that's what we're possibly getting sued for, because somebody thought it's like people are going to fly around in these planes, and from 30,000 feet they're going to drop these development bombs into neighbors' yards, and they're going to do it with laser accuracy, and then they're going to fly to the next neighborhood and they're going to do it, when in reality they should be using Google Street View. And that's what the affordable housing program, the legacy housing program, has allowed us to do in this process. As Wendy said, we could have built 62 units here with not a lot of public process possibly, but they got to this and they had to come before us. So I would argue that this is not a black eye for it. I think this is a very positive thing for it. I do have some concerns that, as Billy said, other people are looking at this that are looking at potential projects, and they may go, woo, no way, dude. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to get beat up. Possibly, but possibly not also. And you can say, and for Aaron and his team, for their process, and you can say, well, they got led down the path because of this. No, they didn't get led down the path because of this. They went down that path because it provided some opportunities for them to build a building, 2 buildings, that they thought would work well for this community. Their big mistake was they didn't go back and they didn't look at the tape from August 5th and August 19th, I believe, meetings. If they would have done that, and if they looked at the amount of neighborhood opposition, which was close to what we've seen here, but not quite as much, to a 54-unit project, then maybe they would have gone out and they would have knocked on all of your doors before they even submitted a plan and said, hey, we bought this 1.5 acres and we're going to build houses here or apartments or affordable housing or something. What would you guys like to see? I'm guessing that probably didn't happen, Aaron? Knock on doors next time. All of us up here have done that. We've knocked on more doors in this town than anybody ever. I can guarantee you. We've all done it. And it's really kind of fun, actually. People are more than happy to talk to you usually. You're going to get a lot of good input, and then you're going to come in with a project. Because what I would say to your project is it really lacks creativity. I mean, it's not your building designs. I mean, you were told to build what you wanted to build. I mean, to put 36 units out there, you're kind of going to get 2 rectangles. But what it lacks in creativity is that transition from the schools to the single family. And your letter that you gave us today, I thought was very, very helpful. And I don't suspect that most of the neighbors saw that. But it wasn't Trump, Sharpie, and hurricane kind of thing. But anyway, it was the neighborhood with some circles drawn on it. And it is really a tale of 2 neighborhoods there. Because you do to the west have single family, you do to the south have single family. But you don't really to the north. You certainly don't to the east. You've got a natural gas pumping station to the east, and you've got schools. So it is a transition area. And so what probably would have been better there, and what the neighborhood would have been would have been better with, was something that transitioned into that. So I can't support it. I don't think that the inclusionary zoning led those guys anywhere. I don't think they brought us a bad project. I think they brought us a project that they thought was good, and I think they brought us a project that they thought was viable. And yes, I do have concerns that as we go forward, other guys will look at it and go, I don't want to do it. I hope they look at it and go, everybody wants this, we just need to figure out how to make it fit in the neighborhood. But for neighbors and for everybody for 15, 20 years that said, we want affordable housing, we do have to have density at some point. Steve's exactly right. We can't do it without density. And that's the hard part of that. I mean, I could vote this either direction, I'll be very, very honest, but I will support Rebecca's motion.
Thanks, Andy. Further comments on the motion? Melissa?
Well, I just want to share, first, thank you, everybody, for coming out and speaking about your concerns. This is a really, really difficult decision to have to make. It is a little demoralizing just because when you've sat up here through a number of development projects that have included some affordable housing, that you just hear the same concerns over and over. And I get it. The growth has exploded in this town and it's caused traffic issues and it makes it, really frustrating in a lot of different ways. Certainly some good things that have come with that growth too. Gosh, where am I going? So I guess, it falls on us then to really assess when do these different concerns really warrant denial or conversely really warrant approval. People talked about single-family homes. I could not afford the home that I live in now if I was moving here today, and I rented until I was 40, and I would love to live in an apartment in a building like this in a town like that we live in. And and if you talk to developers in the area, there are a lot of studios that are going quickly, and so people do have a desire for these places. Sure, it'd be great if we could just provide affordable single-family homes to everybody, but it's just not realistic and wouldn't be affordable. So one of the questions I find myself asking is, if not here, where? Really thinking about where might these projects be appropriate, because while people point out that there's only 7 affordable units attached to this project, they are smaller units, so potentially more affordable for that reason. But this is kind of how it's set up. As Rhonda noted, we've got a number of different tools in the affordable housing or strategic housing plan that we can utilize. This is just one of those tools, and this is kind of how we do it, by chipping away. So you get, 7 units there, 10 units there, 5 units there, maybe 20 units there. So that's just one of the ways that we chip away at the issue of affordable housing. I guess just to reiterate, the fact that we have the Legacy Homes program is the reason we were able to have this debate tonight, because what was used by right prior likely we wouldn't have had this opportunity. So I hate to see the Legacy Homes program disparaged, given that it did give us this opportunity. And, as far as community character, I live in the neighborhood. I'm on Park and just a couple blocks away. And if it weren't for the traffic, I don't see a great discrepancy in character. I mean, there's that huge apartment building right on Park. There's on Pine. You've got kind of there's one on like Summers and 4th where you've got a number of residents living there, rentals, there's stuff on First Street. So like when I'm out walking our dogs around the neighborhood, I don't have this sense of like, oh my gosh, what's that doing there? It's just part of the flavor. And I actually enjoy the fact that our neighborhood is diverse, that we have a mix of things, that it's not just homogeneous, that we have different places for people of all incomes to, be able to enjoy. You've got some big homes, you got some small homes, you got some old homes, you got some new homes, you got, and you have apartment buildings sprinkled in. So I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking out loud here. These are all the things that have been going on in my head. Traffic is certainly, I get it. Like that's, if I were to say, does this meet that condition? It's as many of you have already pointed out, we've already kind of just seems like we've already maxed out what kind of traffic our neighborhood can handle. So, so it's a tough one. But would this project, be the tipping point or make that significant difference? I mean, I'm guessing where there's smaller units, you're not going to have a lot of big families, and so I'm guessing that there aren't going to be a ton of people rushing their kids to school from that development. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be driving around. So anyway, I don't know, I just felt like I had to kind of share those thoughts, and I'm finished. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Frank?
I will support Rebecca's motion, but a couple things I want to bring to everybody's attention, and I think that I think you all get it. I think you understand this.
Microphone.
I'm sorry, it is on.
Towards you.
All right. I've been known not to turn on my mic, so I apologize. Assuming that a project goes in here, there's going to be some increased density in your neighborhood. There's nothing we can do about that. Problem is that, and the other point that Rhonda was making earlier is that this is not an affordable housing development. It's a development with some affordable housing. I think we all need to keep in mind that that was the whole design behind the inclusionary zoning program. We did not want to have reservations of areas where it was only affordable housing. It would not be good for this community. It's not what the community wanted. So I take that argument with a little bit of a grain of salt because, again, we as a community, you included, all showed up and said, we want to disperse our affordable housing. The thing that brings this project in for me is not one that I can support, is the neighborhood's opposition, the impacts on the community, its inconsistency to some degree with the surrounding neighborhood, at least to the west and to the south. But I think anything that goes in there is going to be a significant change from what is in the surrounding neighborhoods. They're not going to be 1,300 or 1,400 square foot homes. That's just not what's going to happen. And so that gives me, again, some pause. But I think we all should look forward to this. This discussion tonight was in fact caused by and allowed by our inclusionary zoning program, which brought you all out tonight and gave you the opportunity to have a voice. Because the prior zoning, before the inclusionary zoning, and again, when we talk about inclusionary zoning, what we all need to understand is the zoning for that property in your neighborhood did not change. The conditions under which it could be developed did change, which is what allowed you to come here tonight and oppose a 34-unit or 36-unit project, as opposed to before inclusionary zoning. If that came in, none of us would be here. We probably wouldn't have even seen it. So I understand all of those things, but I think we ought to thank the inclusionary zoning program for allowing this kind of discussion. And so I hope you'll all, again, continue to support that. Tell us if we've missed something, but that program is what allowed for this discussion tonight. So with that, I yield.
Thanks, Frank. Further discussion on the motion. Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Steve said and a lot of what Andy said, and Melissa and Frank and everyone else for that matter. You know, what rubs me the wrong way is when you're listening, when you're sitting up here and you're listening to someone speak, it's very distracting when people in the crowd are making comments or snickering or vocally disagreeing. And I commend you, Aaron, for being the bad guy in the room and standing up here and having to do that. You know, anyone who knows anything about my job knows I feel you, buddy. I've been there before. But the mayor shouldn't have to tell people, especially people in Whitefish, to just be kind to one another. I mean, if you can't listen to what your neighbor has to say, then there's no point in even showing up. And that really bothers me. Because we sit up here, we listen to everyone, and that's fine. You know, you can come up here and speak, that's fine. But I just, you know, I encourage everyone to listen to your neighbors, listen to what everyone else has to say. You may disagree, but at the end of the day, we all live in Whitefish. We're all part of the same community. I guarantee you we all have each other's best interests at heart. And with that, I will yield.
Thanks, Ryan. Further discussion on the motion? Real quickly.
Do we need to come up with findings?
Yes, I'll address those here pretty shortly. Rebecca?
First off, I am working on traffic, so some of you guys might want to help with that. The other thing I just wanted to say, my office is between 4th and 5th on Spokane, so I walk my dog through your neighborhood frequently. And I did a lot more this last 2 weeks, and you've done a beautiful job keeping our historic neighborhoods in Whitefish just like home. I was just walking around and I felt like this is what home feels like. And so I think a lot of people undervalue the older neighborhoods because they don't realize how much when people come here, they want to see how people actually live here. And I think your neighborhood in that area really has done a nice job creating community. So thank you for showing up and making sure that we are representing you. And then should I do findings of facts?
I have those prepared, but if you, you and or Steve
ahead.
would like to certainly pass that to you. Further comments on the motion? As a reminder, we do have a motion on the table. It was a motion by Councilor Norton to deny the CUP. It was seconded by Steve Quinnell. We need to develop findings of fact to support denial if it is voted down, and those criteria are found on page 75 of the packet. If I were to distill the comments that I listened to this evening from the council, and please add to these if I have missed any, and Angie, I would prefer it if you would draft these findings for our review on the consent agenda at the next meeting. Those would be criteria number 1, growth policy compliance, criteria number 2, transportation, criteria number 4, quality and functionality, criteria number 5, adequacy of public services, including neighborhood impact, and then finally, criteria number 7, neighborhood and community compatibility. If I've missed any, please chime in before we vote on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thanks everyone for coming this evening and participating. Sorry guys. Greg, you picked a great night. Greg and Paul. We're going to continue moving on. We're on item 6B, which is consideration of a request from Eagle Enterprises LLC for a conditional use permit to expand the Don K Service Center located at 6219 Highway 93 South. The property is zoned WB2, which is our secondary business district, and this will be WCUP 19-22. Bailey.
Okay, good evening. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to expand the service center in an existing commercial building. It's, as the mayor said, 6219 Highway 93 South. They're requesting to construct a little less than 5,000 square foot addition onto the southeast corner of the existing building to provide 5 new service bays and some additional workspace. They're also proposing a new canopy, approximately, well, just a little under 2,000 square feet, on the northeast corner of the building. The current WB2 zoning states that an expansion of an existing structure where the addition causes the total footprint to be greater than 15,000 square feet requires a conditional use permit. With the proposed additions, I calculated based off of the CAMA data and then the scale drawings of the plans that they submitted, the building would be a little over 36,000 square feet. This amount does not include the separate body shop or the Subaru building that are to the north. Access to the site is from Highway 93 South, JP Road, and Shiloh Avenue, and none of those access points will be modified with this application. The property is approximately 8.3 acres. It is developed with an existing car dealership and associated commercial uses that are in several buildings on the property. It's surrounded mostly by commercial zoning, but with some residential to the east, that's WR1. The property is, as I said, zoned WB2, which is our secondary business district, and the growth policy designation is our general commercial, which does correspond to the WB2 zoning district. It's connected currently to city services and utilities. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the parcel on November 27th. We emailed advisory agencies, placed a legal in the Whitefish pilot on December 4th, and I had 2 comments that were received with concerns about parking on the property and the overall development of the area, and those were included to the planning board and as well as in your packet this evening. So as you all are aware from the last application, we evaluate the criteria based off of consideration for the conditional use permit criteria and our zoning regulations, and I'm just going to hit the highlights of those. The development proposal is consistent with the purpose and intent of the applicable regulations. As far as setbacks, the majority of the expansion is towards the southern and eastern property lines. At completion, the closest portion of the building would be approximately 40 feet from the eastern property line, so it does comply with setback requirements. It also appears that the building will comply with the height requirements of the zoning, which is 35 feet, and this would be confirmed at the time of building permit as well. There's no maximum lot coverage required in the WB2 zoning. All access requirements are being met with the existing approaches. The fire marshal will review the building plan to ensure all emergency standards are met. The northeastern corner of the proposed new canopy, as I said, is approximately 40 feet from the side property line. With the existing parking that's along that eastern property line, there's only a 20-foot space for emergency access around the proposed building expansion. So he's requesting a condition of approval that the applicant maintain a minimum 20-foot wide emergency fire lane around the proposed addition in all seasons, and that this area along that eastern property line be striped as an emergency fire lane and signed for no parking, so that way there's access around the entire building at all times. The application does state the addition will reduce the overall number of parking spaces on the site by 6 spaces. Under the zoning regulations, the dealership is considered a retail use, which requires a minimum of 1 parking space per 300 square feet of gross floor area. And then separately, service bays require 3 spaces per bay. The addition, as I said, is proposing 5 new service bays, so that would require 15 dedicated parking spaces. However, we were unable to determine how many existing service bays are within the current structure and how much of the existing building is devoted to retail versus like office or just staff area, things like that. So we are requesting as a condition that the applicant provide the planning department with an accurate count and designated location of all parking spaces for employees and customers customers prior to approval of their building permit, so that we can make sure that it is, as there are parking out there, but they do have areas for designated customer and employee parking, and they are meeting that requirement, not just with inventory as well. And then during my site visit, I also noticed that the parking that's along the eastern property line is not currently paved. According to our regulations, all commercial uses, including non-conforming commercial uses, are required to have paved parking lots and access driveways. So I am proposing a condition of approval that those parking spaces along the eastern property line be paved as well. The traffic circulation is remaining unchanged. Open space is not required for the proposed use. No additional fencing or screening is required or is proposed at this time. And we will require compliance with the landscaping chapter, and that would be confirmed at the time of building permit as well. The property, as I said previously, it's connected to city services, so it's served by both municipal water and sewer, and that's adequate to serve the project. That we did update, or the city updated the engineering standards for stormwater, and that was recently adopted and effective as of December 2nd. Although the applicant is removing a paved surface and replacing it with a building, under the new standards for stormwater, stormwater plan will be required prior to issuance of a building permit, or at least Public Works wants to know what their stormwater is out there and review that at this time. No traffic impact study was required for the addition. No impacts are anticipated beyond what's existing there at the site already. Let's see. As I said, the proposal will comply with the maximum height standards. It actually will be lower than the maximum height of the existing building. Massing, bulk, and scale are all part of review from the Architectural Review Committee, and this will require the committee approval prior to issuance of a building permit. And then, as I said, the existing neighborhood is a mixture of commercial and residential uses. It is located within our Highway 93 South Corridor study area, and the steering committee is looking at issues surrounding the corridor, including land use, urban design, and transportation. But right now, there is no recommendation from the committee, and that's expected, and hopefully in the next couple months. Staff recommended approval of the application with 11 conditions. The planning board met on December 19th and considered their request. There were no members of the public that spoke at that meeting, and those draft minutes were attached as part of your packet. And following the hearing, the planning board did unanimously recommend approval. So I'm happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well to answer questions.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Frank?
Bailey, on a conditional use permit like this, they're expanding their building. I presume they may be adding a few more employees as a result of their expansion. Is there anything that we can do in terms of conditioning this approval, if we're going to do that, that would require them or get them to commit to requiring that all of their employees park on site as opposed to on side streets as they're currently doing now? Is there anything we can do to encourage that?
Well, they only have to, under our parking regulations, we just have a minimum number of spaces. So if their employees are more than that, and granted, it was just the retail space is 1 per 300 square feet. So if they are meeting that number, that's all that we can require. If overflow parking can go off of the property. So there's not, unfortunately, in that retail parking standard, there isn't anything about a certain number of employees or one space for every 2 employees on shift like some of our other uses. It's just a flat rate based off of the gross floor area. So that was my, I guess you could say, my reason for adding that condition of the parking plan is to show, okay, yes, we have inventory that's on the property that they can have, but we want to make sure that they are meeting that required number, and those employee spaces are being utilized for employees as well as customers, so that should limit, or hopefully would limit, the amount of off-street parking. But we can't require them to have more parking than what the parking standards dictate.
Thank you. Further questions for Bailey? Thanks, Bailey. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6B of our agenda, and I would ask Greg if you have anything to add, just name and address for the record, please.
Greg Schaefer, Don K, 6219 Highway 93 South. So I want to answer a few questions here that came up in regards to Frank, the addition of employees. It isn't a matter of adding any more employees. It's about finding more available work stalls for our current employees. Right now, we're almost at 100% stall utilization, which means we have one technician in every stall in that shop, which does not add to the productivity of getting vehicles serviced if you're waiting for parts and things like that. So our intention is really not to add any more employees, but to also, to more importantly, increase the available workspace for the current employees that we have. And there's other portions of that addition that incorporate additional oil storage for our bulk oil, special tools, things like that that are kind of clogging up the shop. And with that canopy expansion that's out the back is basically to be, provide our current employees with an additional space to work outside if it's raining, snowing, things like that, to be able to pre-deliver cars, vacuum them out, finish cleaning them up for delivery. The one thing that I do know that's going to happen, that's inevitable, is that current building that's there, the body shop is fully sprinkled, the Subaru building is fully sprinkled, the old building has never been sprinkled. And I do know with the addition that it's proposed that either half of that building, the shop area, is a must that it has to be sprinkled with fire suppression, or we do the whole thing. It's really figuring out what's more cost effective, but also makes it safer for the employees that are there. The luxury that we have is we have all the property across Highway 93, which we are very good neighbors with the residents back there. In fact, it was my idea to have the president of the homeowners association come to the city or get with the city to make Shiloh where you can only park on one side. And of course, we want to park on our side. But for fire apparatus and safety of our employees, snow plowing and that, it really didn't make any sense. It's not a wide enough road to have it to be able to park on both sides. And on Shiloh, it's already no parking on the east side where the approach to those condos are, and all the fire hydrants are on the east side anyway. So you wouldn't want anybody parking there. So we can take our inventory. In fact, the south side of the building where the existing drive-through is, where the canopy is, there's approximately 25 vehicles that are all Jeep Grand Cherokees and Cherokees that basically our inventory can be adjusted. We can move inventory across the highway when needed, and we do it all the time. And so as far as available parking, our greatest interest is making sure that somebody that comes in there that wants to do business with us can maybe even find a parking spot. So we're adjusting inventory all the time. And then the other thing that we've done to be neighborly and good neighbors through the years, because of course we were there first and then they built the condos and decided to move in, which is fine with us. But all of the truck traffic of the auto carriers bringing in the loads of vehicles, slowly but surely, there's a few drivers out there, and Mr. Kennelly had to call me the other morning and let me know that there was a truck out there. They're all delivering vehicles on the other side of 93 over in the, I don't like to refer to it yet as a funeral home, but it is a funeral home over there. So all that traffic has been diverted. So the only truck traffic that we have now is parts delivery, FedEx, UPS, and that sort of thing. And they come in off the approach on JP, or they'll come down Shiloh and come in the back, but they make a circle and then they go back out to the light at 93. And so we've tried to make the flow and be neighborly as much as we can. But anyway, we love being in Whitefish. Don Kay's done a great job. His 3 boys are working there, and that's his legacy to stay there. We just need a bit more room, and I can promise you this. I won't be back because we have no more space. That's it. We got the body shop addition is going to be done by the end of the month, and thank you very much for helping us with that. The Subaru building was built, the detail, there is no more space. We don't want to build anymore. We just have to have some extra space to go through the next 5 or 10 years of growth and being in Whitefish. So, any questions?
You're not going to come in for a request for a parking deck?
You know, there's many of the employees that said, can you go to the city and see if they'd approve us a parkade or something like that? I said, no, that ain't gonna happen. I can guarantee you that. We'll do the shuttling of employees from across 93 to the business before we start thinking about any parkades.
Thanks, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Rebecca?
So in the past, the car dealerships were way out of town, and now we've grown up around the two that were there, and now you're the remaining one. But when you guys start to go across the highway, it doesn't seem to visually tie in that well with your main place. Do you have any plans to kind of make it signage or anything that makes it look other than a parking lot? Because it is right on the entrance into downtown. And
Well, actually, if you look at it after the renovations, the funeral home is not a funeral home anymore. It is actually our accessory and detail area. And the outside of the funeral home doesn't look like a funeral home anymore. We took down the canopy, we redid the outside, put some nice colors to it. The landscaping is not too awful bad. So I think we've done a good job of trying to change that appearance of that area. As regards to the future, you know, that's entirely up to the economy, Don Kay, and what he wants to do with the property over there. But if I could speculate a little bit, the property across the way eventually, maybe someday, if we can continue to work with the city on our growth, because we'd like to stay here. You just said it yourself, we're the last standing dealership in Whitefish, and for one, the last locally owned dealership. So if we were to do something over there, it would be more on the lines of possibly building a Chevy dealership over there to relieve some of the pressure on this side, but that's a long ways down the road. And all we're looking for right now is to make some adjustments that's going to get us through the next 5 to 10 years with the amount of business that we do have.
Thanks, Greg. We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6B. Is there any public testimony this evening on this item? Any public comments? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Andy?
I would move that we approve WCUP 19-22, adopting the findings of fact and staff report, 11 conditions of approval as recommended to us by our own Whitefish Planning Board on their December 19, 2019 meeting.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor, excuse me. Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Is there further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Greg. Yep. We'll move on to item 6C, which is a request from Mark Fennessy for a conditional use permit located at 1460 Barclay Lane to convert the existing residential structure into a guest house to facilitate the construction of a new single-family dwelling, and the property is zoned WR1, which is our one-family residential district. Bailey.
Okay. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to convert the existing residential structure into a guest house to facilitate the construction of a new single-family dwelling on the property. The proposed guest house would be located within an existing manufactured home, which is considered a legal non-conforming structure as it does not comply with the current Class A manufactured home, which is a double-wide standard. The building, attached carport, and deck has a total footprint of approximately 1,600 square feet. The structure does comply with all setback requirements in addition to the building height and lot coverage requirements. The property is accessed from Barclay Lane, which is a publicly maintained road. The property is approximately 0.7 acres in size. As I said, it's currently developed with a single-family residence, which is the existing manufactured home at this time. It's surrounded by residential uses to the north, south, and east, as well as to the east, a conservation easement. And then the west is Whitefish Lake, and it's a mixture of WR1 and SAG 10 around that area. The property is zoned WR1, which is our one-family residential district. The growth policy designation is urban, which does correspond to the WR1. It's connected to city services and utilities. We did mail a notice to adjacent landowners within 150 feet on of the parcel on November 27th. We emailed advisory agencies and also placed a legal in the Whitefish pilot on December 4th. When I wrote the staff report, I didn't have any comments, but one comment in support of the project was received after the planning board packet was completed, and that was included as part of your council packet as well. So we evaluate the request based on the criteria in the zoning regulations. I'll just try to hit the highlights of it. The proposal is consistent with the purpose and intent of the regulations. We do have special provisions, requirements for a guest house, and the project does appear to meet all those requirements. Those performance standards do state that a guest house may not be rented or no rent may be charged or received in a non-resort residential district unless it's used in a compensation agreement between the owner and a worker. The proposed use will become accessory to a future single-family home and adequate parking will be provided. The applicant can't apply for a single-family home without a conditional use permit being approved at that time. We wouldn't be able to sign off on a building permit. So that's where they're going with this project. The existing structure, as I said, it's a legal non-conforming building because that zoning only permits Class A's or a double-wide manufactured home. The building has been inspected by the fire marshal for compliance with fire code standards. Since it's a legal non-conforming structure, there's no requirements to bring the structure up to current zoning or building codes unless it's relocated, remodeled, reconstructed, moved. It's allowed to stay there and be as it is for right now. The structure does comply with the setbacks required for a primary structure since the footprint is greater than 600 square feet. The existing driveway is currently not paved, so we are requesting or proposing a condition that the first 80 feet of the existing driveway and any new parking areas would be required to be paved. And the subject property does comply with both the minimum lot size and lot width requirements of the zoning. The maximum permitted lot coverage in the zoning is 35%. All setbacks and lot coverage requirements can be met, and that would be confirmed at the time of a building permit for a future single-family house. The property is adjacent to Whitefish Lake, which does have an associated regulated floodplain. Residential structures must be located above the established floodplain elevation that's established by FEMA, and that would be confirmed at the time of building permit for the new single-family dwelling. The future single-family dwelling must also be located outside of the Lakeshore Protection Zone and our water quality setbacks at all, and that would all be looked at the time of building permit. The zoning regulations requires 2 parking spaces for the single-family dwelling unit, and then 2 parking spaces be provided for the guest house because the total floor area is greater than 1,200 square feet. The property does provide adequate space to accommodate all parking needs on site as well. And the zoning regulations do exempt single-family dwellings from the landscape requirements. As I said, the property is served by municipal water and sewer will be reviewed by Public Works at the time of building permit. Stormwater drainage would also be reviewed by Public Works at the time of building permit when they've submitted for the new home as well. Traffic impacts are anticipated to be minimal since the property would include a single-family residence located within an existing neighborhood with similar uses. No impact is anticipated beyond what would be expected from a residential use currently on site, because it is currently used as a residential structure. The proposed guest house, as I said, would meet the lot coverage and height standards of the zoning. There's no limit to total floor area of a guest house, unlike an accessory apartment at 600 square feet, but the size must be accessory to a single-family dwelling, and this reduces the overall mass and scale of the building just by being smaller than the main house. Additionally, the future home must comply with all setbacks, and that will be confirmed later. The neighborhood is primarily single-family residential, and the proposed use is not expected to change or impact the existing character of that neighborhood. Staff recommended approval of the application with 7 conditions. The planning board met on December 19th and considered the request. There were no members of the public that spoke at that meeting, and those draft minutes were attached as part of your packet. Following the hearing, the planning board unanimously recommended approval of the request, but they did make an amendment to condition number 3 to add that the first 80 feet added to that, all driveways must be paved, to the beginning of that condition, and that passed on a 5-1 vote. I'm happy to answer questions, and I know you looked at Steve was in opposition, sorry. But I'm happy to answer questions. The applicant has sat here all night long as well, so you're happy to
Thanks,
answer
Bailey.
questions.
Any
too.
questions for Bailey before we go to the public hearing? We did advertise for a public hearing on item 6C of the agenda. Mitch, thanks for your patience. Do you have anything to add tonight, or the applicant's representative?
Hello, Mitch Ewer. No, nothing really to add other than it's pretty straightforward, like Bailey laid out, and we're just building a new house and gonna keep the little house as a guest house.
Good luck with the project.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming tonight. Is there any public comment on this item? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Ryan, please.
I would move to approve WCUP 19-23, the findings of fact in the staff report, and the 7 conditions of approval as recommended by the Whitefish Planning Board on December 19th, 2019.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous as well. Michelle. Thanks, Mitch. I'm going to go ahead and suggest an agenda change, and I'm going to go ahead and move item 8A. Angie, if you don't mind, up the agenda, and we will address item 8A, which will be resolution 20-2. Would it still be 2, Michelle, or since we are moving it up, would it be 20-1?
It would be 20-1.
So we'll move that to 20-1, a resolution accepting fee ownership of the Whitefish Trail Corridor in Haskell Basin and approving the right of way. Angie.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My report begins on page 382 of the packet. So 4 years ago, the city and Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks closed on the conservation easement in Haskell Basin. It covers approximately 3,020 acres of land owned by F.H. Stoltz Land and Lumber Company. And as you guys will recall, it was kind of a wonderful thing that was critical for protecting our municipal water supply, as well as preserving open space, natural habitat, and recreational opportunities. In conjunction with our conservation easement, Stoltz granted the city an easement over its property to construct a 5.5 mile section of the Whitefish Trail, which was part of our Close the Loop campaign. When we were negotiating both easements, Stoltz expressed considerable concern regarding the additional liability that could be placed upon it by accepting a constructed trail on its land. As a result, we agreed with Stoltz on a solution where Stoltz would transfer fee ownership of the trail corridor to the city within 4 years. And that requirement that we take fee ownership is memorialized in both the Haskell Basin Watershed Deed of Conservation easement and the Public Recreational Trail easement. And so the 5.5 mile segment of the Whitefish Trail was constructed on Stoltz's property in 2017, and I believe it was completed in 2018. When we began the process, however, of talking about the transfer of fee ownership, we realized that in order to have the trail surveyed would be extremely expensive, require probably 2 summers of 2 surveyors working full-time, and require so much metal in the ground that you would end up tripping over it when you use the trail. As such, we and Andy Belsky of River Design Group worked with the county, and we eventually obtained its agreement that the fee ownership of the trail corridor would qualify for a right-of-way exemption from the surveying requirements of the Montana Subdivision Plating Act, which was really cool because I think it's the first time it's been done in Montana that a trail corridor will actually qualify as a right-of-way. So the proposed right-of-way deed, which has been approved by Stoltz, transfers fee ownership of the trail corridor from Stoltz to the city. In accordance with the easements, it reserves certain rights to Stoltz, including the right to cross the trail corridor if it doesn't unreasonably interfere with public access, the right to temporarily restrict public access during active timber harvesting and fire and the right of first refusal for any timber harvested on the trail corridor. It also contains a reversion clause, which basically, if the city stops using the trail as a public recreational trail, it will revert to Stoltz. So there's no financial requirements or impacts of accepting the fee ownership of the Whitefish Trail Corridor in Haskell Basin. It just basically involves recording a deed with county. And staff does respectfully request that the City Council approve resolution number 20-1. And I would like to thank Stoltz, in particular Paul McKenzie, for all his help when we were trying to figure out a solution to the surveying requirements. Stoltz was extremely accommodating. And I'd also like to thank Andy Belsky, who spent countless hours.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate the staff report. Any questions for Angie on her staff report? Not seeing any. We do need a motion for approval.
I would move to approve Resolution 20-1, a resolution accepting fee ownership of the Whitefish Trail Corridor in Haskell Basin and approving the right-of-way deed.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Hartman. Before we vote, Paul, did you have any comment? Thanks for your patience tonight. And I was just thinking it will be 3 years on February 1st since we passed the conservation easement at the council. So hopefully this is the last chapter, right? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Angie. We will move back to item 7A, which is in Craig's Court, which is consideration of State Park Road approval and of design and authorization to bid Phase 2. Craig.
Thank you very much. I think I can hit the highlights of this one pretty quickly. You guys are fairly familiar with the State Park Road project. So this is the second phase where we will take over essentially at Haugen Heights Road, where we ended at Phase 1. This phase will go all the way to the train tracks. We have already begun public involvement for this phase of the project. Our first public meeting was held actually about a week before the completion of Phase 1 on October 24th. And the second public meeting will be held later this week on the 23rd, this Thursday. Assuming that we are authorized to proceed with the bidding and a contract is awarded, final public information meeting will be held in March or early April. Attached to the report are several figures which provide an overview of the design of this phase. This design does incorporate the recommendations of staff and RPA and will be presented at the public meeting later this week. Just a couple highlights to hit. One of the main elements of this phase of the project is the elimination of the double 90-degree turns, which you see up there on the screen. The roadway will remain a 32-foot wide road through these double curves, and then it'll trunk down to 28 feet just to the north and extend all the way to the train tracks as a 28-foot road. The 8-foot concrete path that was installed with Phase 1 will extend to the railroad tracks. We'll also include that 6-foot landscape boulevard the rest of the way, equipped with our standard LED streetlights. There will be a new stormwater system that will be completed as part of this project. It will have an outfall just before the train tracks and discharge with treatment to an existing wetland. We will bid the project with very specific traffic control plans as we did with Phase 1. This project will have a short detour for about 30 days during the first phase of the project, and then after that it will just be a one-lane, two-way project with flaggers. So with the proposed redesign, there's a short section of State Park Road just to the east of Patton Lane, which will be abandoned. In addition, there's also a remnant portion of State Park Road to the north of Lake Park Lane, which will be renamed to Patton Lane. This is shown on the image that's on the screen, and if you approve this recommended design, there's also a resolution of intent for council to proceed with those actions to rename a section of road and abandon a piece of roadway. The proposed schedule for the project, assuming we proceed tonight, is to advertise bids next month, open bids on the 5th of March, and award the project on March 16th on the council's second meeting in March. I don't think I need to go through the detailed scope of the project in terms of schedule, but there are a couple of different phases. Like last year, we don't plan to do any work over the 4th of July, nor do we plan to do any work over Labor Day. But essentially, there's kind of three main tasks that have to get done, and we'll be working essentially from early April until the end of October to get this job done. The overall project budget for all of State Park Road, both phases, was $5.3 million. The current construction cost estimate for Phase 2 is $2.7 million. When you add that to the land acquisition and the engineering and the cost for Phase 1, we're right at $5.4 million, so we're pretty much right in line with budget. I anticipate that we'll be able to trim that down a little bit with the bidding of the project. So, based on all the guidance and direction we've received today, it is staff's recommendation that council approve this design and authorize Public Works to solicit bids for Phase 2 of the State Park Road project. We also recommend approval of the enclosed resolution of intent, which will essentially accomplish what you see on the screen there and abandon a piece of State Park Road and rename the remnant to Patton Lane.
Thanks, Craig. Nice work. Any questions for Craig on his staff report?
I do have a question.
Steve?
Was there ever any discussion about additional parking there? Because, I mean, it gets pretty jammed up with boats and trailers and stuff, and now there's gonna be a sidewalk there.
Yeah, in fact, it will eliminate some parking. There is parking that does occur on State Park Road just south of the tracks. And in speaking with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they didn't have an issue with it. I think we will have some objection, but with the redesign of the road, and the curb and gutter, we'll be eliminating that parking. We haven't looked at additional land acquisition to design parking down on that end, but it didn't really seem to be a desire of the community or council to date. But right now, that park fills up pretty quickly, and
are people gonna be able to park on the road?
It's intended to be no parking on the road.
Okay, because they will park on the sidewalk, wherever else
Yeah,
they can.
well, it'll be
pull over
signed
far
for no
enough.
parking.
Okay.
Right now, without curb and gutter or any kind of sidewalk, you can get far enough off the shoulder that the parking works. It does jam it up quite a bit, but, yeah, I think there will be a few spots that'll be missed there.
Thanks, Steve. We will need a motion to approve the design and authorization to bid Phase 2 plus adopting Resolution 20-2.
I move that we adopt Resolution 20-2, resolution by City Council indicating its intent to abandon the intersection of Lake Park Lane on State Park Road and rename it the remnant State Park Road north of the intersection.
Does your motion also include approval of the design and authorization to bid Phase 2?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. Thanks. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
We'll move back to item 8B, which will be ordinance 20-2, if I'm not mistaken, an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Architectural Review Committee of Title II of the Whitefish City Code to change its membership qualifications, and this will be on a first reading. Angie.
So good evening again. This is more of just a housekeeping amendment to the requirements for the Architectural Review Committee. As the code now reads, the committee has 7 members who have to reside within the corporate limits of the city, or employed or own a business in the city. And just because of that requirement, we've had kind of considerable difficulty filling the positions because it requires 2 architects and 1 design professional. We have, I think, problems filling a lot of our committee positions, but particularly when it's, a professional position, because people just don't have the time. So Michelle, I think, can say that we have received applications from people that don't necessarily live here, own a business here, or work here, but they, you know, they do projects in Whitefish, and they have interest in sitting on our committees. So given our kind of difficulty in filling it, this ordinance would basically allow us, if we don't have enough qualified individuals who actually are in the city of Whitefish, to expand our committee membership to the 59937 zip code. It would just give us a little bit more wiggle room in trying to fill these positions on the ARC Review Committee. So again, staff would recommend that you approve it and just give us a wider pool of applicants.
Thanks, Ange. Any questions for Angie? Rebecca?
This is for Michelle too. Do you think we'll be doing this with other committees? I know it's immediately for the architectural review, but do you think we should open it up to other committees as well, since you guys run that part of things?
You know, Rebecca, I think it's a discussion to be had for sure. This is just the one I think that's been really, really tough to fill, but I know Michelle and I have talked a little bit about making some of the requirements a little less stringent, so we can get warm bodies and people that are actually interested in there. So I think it is something that we'll be reviewing going forward.
Thanks, Rebecca. We will need a motion. Frank?
I would move to approve ordinance 20-2, an ordinance amending Chapter 10, Architectural Review Committee of Title II of the Whitefish City Code to change membership qualifications.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hartman. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Michelle. Thanks, Angie. You have Dana's written report and close with the packet. Any questions for Dana? Dana, anything additional to report on?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple things. The next work session, we will have a litigation update for you all. That'll be a closed executive session. We will also have other topics after we discuss at our next meeting, I'm sure, our staff meeting. Tonight, with the first public hearing and the discussions that were had regarding mold down and in the area where the traffic is a concern, you know, I first want to, in talking with Chief Dow, you know, let the council know and the public know that that is our highest patrolled area in the city. And so while there are people that do speed and we cannot catch them all, our police department does their best to enforce the laws there. I also do think, as Rebecca mentioned, I think it'd be a great idea to talk to the schools and see what type of plans they might have to help further help with congestion there. If there's some type of scheduling that they could do with when children arrive. We, as a city, are really landlocked in that area. So it is the school that is driving that traffic congestion during those two times where cars come at a standstill. So I think, Rebecca, as you mentioned, you were talking about that. I think it's something that, as the city, I would like to also be involved in those discussions as well. I think that's one way we can talk about it. As the school grows, we will just continue to see more cars driving in because those neighborhoods aren't growing as much, but as the city grows, more kids will go to that school. And then finally, just so that you all are aware, we are holding interviews for the finance director position next Thursday. Mayor Molfeld will be sitting on the committee along with other staff, and so hopefully we'll have a person here soon for that. So thank you.
Thanks, Dana. We will move to councilor comments, and we have one item, 10A. I need to ratify the county commissioner's appointment of Scott Freudenberger as Flathead County's designee to the Whitefish Planning Board, and I'll motion to appoint Scott, and I just need a simple ratification from the council by a showing of hands. Thank you, and that's unanimous, Michelle, as well. And we'll start with comments, and Steve, would you like to start this evening?
Last time.
We'll start with Rebecca next time.
Okay. I don't have too many comments. I think that one of the things that was very refreshing to see is I think partly because we changed the noticing requirements and expanded that, we got more initial input about the 7th Street project, and then if we held another meeting, we'd probably get another 60 people to talk. So I think that was a good thing. It's good to see people come out in support of where they live and their communities. And and the inclusionary zoning is going to be, it's going to be something we're going to be constantly working on, so I hope we get used to it.
Thanks, Steve. Frank?
No further comments this evening. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Frank. Melissa?
No comments.
Thanks, Melissa. Ryan?
No comment.
Thanks, Ryan. Andy?
Just because I wasn't here, welcome, Steve and Rebecca. While I'm sad to lose the two counselors that we had, I'm super excited to have you guys here and look forward to working with you. That'll be great. Question for Angie. I sent you the letter from the DEQ. I know you haven't had a chance to look at it, but I'm just gonna, Ed Leeser sent me something from the DEQ, and it was a letter that was sent actually to the House Interim Committee looking at the study committee for septic leachate, essentially. And as it turns out, it looks like under state law that we actually do have, and we would certainly have as a community, the right to file suit against Lion Mountain based on their non-source point pollution going into the lake from their septic tanks. Angie hasn't had a chance to look at this, but as I read it, and it kind of looks that way, and hopefully that will be the case. But if that is the case, and it looks like something, I would want us to put that on an agenda item in the future, and certainly have a look at it for something of consideration that we'd like to do. We have tried and tried and tried again with the carrot with those people, and it's time to use the stick, in my opinion, because they are not gonna, they're not gonna bite. And if there's a stick that we can use, I suggest that we do it. So, other than that, that's all I have.
Great, thanks, Frank, or Andy. Rebecca?
I did just want to tell you what I'm doing about the traffic, since you're interested, Dana. And I talked to the principal, and he gave me like 4 or 5 different reference people to talk to. The traffic guard, we only have 4 paid traffic guards near the schools, but he would be interested in having volunteers also train. So I thought maybe that would be one thing we could do, is start having more traffic guards out at different intersections farther out. They are also looking at increasing busing within the city. And then someone told me the trolley service is for sale, and I thought, wouldn't that be fun? But then I thought, it's probably not legal to put kids on trolley buses, but I thought it would be great. I would love to ride one, but so anyways, I have to find out a little bit more about when the school bus is expanding. And then what my idea was to have the high school, we have an AP statistics class, and those kids could do a research study to see where the traffic goes and all that, do counting, tabulating it, and actually like use it as a real life scenario. This is a problem, how are we gonna solve it? And tie it in a little bit with the Sustainability Center and some of our goals for the community with walking and biking and things like that, and see if we can improve things like that. I don't know if it's possible to have a warming room where people could actually drop off their kids early and then they stay there until they're ready to go somewhere else. But so all those ideas I was kind of looking at because I think the biggest part was we've heard a lot of alarm from the people that have children and grandchildren that are in the school districts. And so why don't we try to actually solve that problem? So I'm going to kind of keep working on that. And then the other thing I did in this last 2 weeks is I went and looked at our quote affordable housing projects, and I ran into an appraiser at one point, and our affordable housing, the new ones at Trailview, are $317,000. And that means, and she said a lot of people need to put a 20% down, which is close to $60,000. And so I think we really do need to look at whether or not our projections for how this affordable housing thing is going to work are actually realistic based on poverty levels and real life people. So I know it's based on AMI and all that stuff, but maybe we really need to have a really strong interaction with the goals and see if they're actually working with our build out, because we also lost the affordable housing that was at Altaview. Remember, Dave, when they came in too high and we lost all those units because it was, when they finally penciled it out, we didn't get any because the market value was lower than the AMI or something like that. So I just have a concern about staying on course with something that might not actually be really affordable for most people. I don't think it's affordable. Do you guys think that's, well, maybe it is, but we still don't know about the loans and the grants and stuff that are coming through that program. But I still think we have to look at real people's impact on that. So that's all I'd like to say is I think we, at some point, should have a discussion about if we're on track with that. Thank you.
I'll respond to that, Rebecca. As part of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee that I sit on, we just discussed this, that we're approaching almost year one of the IZ program in effect, and we recognize that the housing needs assessment at this point is what, 4 years old, Dana?
It was from 2016.
2016, it was authored, and it was always the understanding that that document would need to be refreshed to reflect changes in the market. And I think part of that would be exactly what you spoke to. So we'll be talking about that more at our committee level, and I'll just continue to keep the council updated on that. But good points. I have nothing further this evening. How about staff? Chief Dow.
Neglected to relate to you that last week the 911 Administrative Board met, and we forwarded a recommendation to the commissioners to put the 911 funding recommendation on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Of course, that's going to be up to them. So looks like a pretty good plan. I think it's something that's we can market, and hopefully it'll go forward, and we'll have a formula that's fair to everybody, and the cities won't get double taxed like we have been.
Great.
Thanks.
Is there some information you could forward to Dana or the council related to that? What it's going to look like?
I've been involved with all the
Okay.
developing of that plan, actually. So the funding committee sent it over to the board, and then the board's recommended it to the county commissioners because it would be creating a district where it'd be like our assessments we do with our maintenance districts. It would be set, the initial year is set with the vote for the dollar amount, and then future years will be considered by the county commissioners for increases. So I will send that out in conjunction with that. The city managers, we are still looking at and discussing the what type of MOU would have to be, or interlocal agreement would have to be in place with all the jurisdictions to make sure that the funding from the state is still available, because we actually have sent our funding over there for dispatch services. So we're working on it, and we'll be still discussing as among the city managers that agreement and how that might look if the vote passes. But we can definitely send out the draft. I think they have a draft resolution actually that's prepared. So
Something simple, that'd be great.
yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Chief. Anything further from council? We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.